All right, all you cool cat and kitties out there, we're back again in the Cavern of Chaos. Something I just threw together on that name, and for some reason, it's cheesy enough to work. So,
we talk about whatever comes up.
Yeah, we got Jared here, and he had the foresight to stop us there because he had a good topic for today, and I was just ready to go. Yes, but oh yeah, what you been into this week, there, Jared?
What have I been? Oh, I'll show you something I just got that has nothing to do with comics. This just came moments before. I got a bicycle wheel truing stand.
Nice. Nice.
So now I can make sure my bicycle wheels are true.
We got John Jones popping up there. Thanks a lot, guy. Good to see you out there.
How you doing?
Nice to know everything's working.
I've been working on my bicycle, my road bicycle, because I ride it all winter and it's in need of some repair. My friend also gave me his mountain bike, which is in need of repair too. And I've been, the mountain bike has been driving me crazy because every time I go to fix something, I see what else I need to fix. And I was just like, oh, no wonder he got rid of this bike. It's like the latest thing. I didn't even know this broke on a bike because once again, I've never had to fix it. The rear derailleur, which is the part that changes the gears.
All right.
On a rear derailleur is usually a derailleur hanger, and you attach that to kind of the axle, and then there's a bolt that you screw in. That's how there's. Nowadays, I found out that modern bikes, you can remove the derailleur hanger and put a new one on. But this is an older bike where the derailleur hanger is welded right to the bike. So I had to order a new I went to put his derailleur on, and it was in parts, and all the parts weren't there. So I'm like, you got to get a new derailleur. Oh well, I'm buying parts for this bike like a crazy person. Got the new derailleur, went to put it on, and like I said, there's a bolt in the derailleur that bolts to the frame. The threads in the frame were stripped. And I'm like,
there's an actual tool you can get that you put the screw through that'll rethread it, but I don't even know what it's called to order it.
I found that tool on Google. And what it is, first of all, I had to get a drill bit. Luckily, they said what the drill bit size was. And I have to drill out that hole. And then they sell just for bicycles. It's a little bolt hole that you slip in the back, and then the bolt goes in there. $22 for that little thing, and it still hasn't come yet. But I was just like,
See, that happened to you on a bike. It's happened to me on cars with the lug nut. On used cars. I don't buy used cars. I've had one used car my entire life. I went never again. So you never know what you're going to get. Yeah, there's nothing like being out there with a propane blowtorch on the side of the road at 2 a.m. thinking you're doing something, So, it was the one time I had a blowtorch.
That just reminds me of the story of my nephew. My brother-in-law is one of these guys who can fix anything. He's got tools all over the place, can fix everything. So my nephew, my sister's boy, he's also that. I think he's 16 now. And since he was a kid, he's had all his father's tools. He's been fixing things. And one of the things he has that he uses from his father all the time is a blowtorch. He starts his campfires with a blowtorch. He, melts things, whatever, 15, 16-year-olds do when they got a blowtorch around. Then it was like last Christmas or the Christmas before, he asked for a Zippo lighter for Christmas. Not that he smoked. I actually have collected Zippo lighters over the years. I have maybe half a dozen of them now, but on and off. I've never been a smoker. I just got caught at a Giants game once tailgating, and neither my friend or I had a lighter. So that from then on in, I bought a Zippo lighter with me to the games. But my sister was like, "No way, he cannot have a lighter." And I'm like, "He's got a blowtorch." I don't understand why you think a lighter isn't safe for him when he's got a blowtorch.
No, back in the day, whether you smoked or not or whatever, the two things you had to get or even collect, and you didn't even realize you were doing it, and all your buddies did it. at least around here, was pocket knives and Zippos. But the trick with the Zippo was that you had to do the trick where you would hold it in your fingers, and with just your fingers, you would snap it open and have it lit just in one motion.
Yep. And all through the 90s, I always had a Zippo lighter in my pocket, and I didn't smoke.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time I got a propane Zippo lighter, I was like, what the hell? You know?
And I used to, my friend used to have, I don't think I ever got one. He used to carry, he had, Peter Bag's Hate. Mm-hmm. He had a Hate Zippo lighter that he carried all the time.
Now that's
but impressive. He smoked at the time, so he at least used it all. But that was a cool one. It had Peter Bag art on the side.
The ones that got me were the ones that had like it's probably in a box there. I know I still have it, but it had a 3D metal eagle on it. You know what I mean? It was gold, had an eagle on it. You had these guys that had like these redneck patriotic Vietnam leftover lighters and all this stuff. And just to let you know, some of the YouTube channels I'll watch are these restoration videos where these guys take 100-year-old Zippos, just whatever they can find. They do a 20-minute video where you're just sucked in while they restore these things.
And I didn't realize
they're amazing. I'll send you one. They're amazing.
I watched a couple of Zippo video lighters a couple years ago, and I didn't realize there were so many counterfeit Zippo lighters.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, you don't have a lot of flea markets, do you? There's fake everything. DVDs, Zippos, He-Man toys. I'm not joking. I've been in a couple places where they had so many bootleg anime videos and stuff in this little tin. I was waiting for the FBI to walk in. I mean, yeah.
The first Zippo lighter I got because of history too. They sold it to me with a historical angle when I just was walking in the store, and it was a replica brass Zippo lighter that was the same one that our boys took overseas with on World War II.
You just took me Pulp Fiction with Christopher Walken saying your dad kept his watch up his butt. You know, I'm like, this is where we're going, Jared. You know.
But matter of fact, my father just recently gave me. I have it up on my desk here. This is a Zippo lighter. He gave me this. He's like, this is his Air Force Zippo lighter, and it says on it the 926 AC&W Squadron, Baffin Island, Northwest Territory, Canada. My father was he was on a radio station up in the very north of Canada, man in the radio station watching for Russian missiles coming over the pole. That's what he was doing in the early 60s.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, that's his lighter from there that I keep on my not that I've ever known my father smoke, but I think he smoked in the Air Force back in the early 60s.
That's when they told you they had vitamins. Your doctor recommended it in the commercials. So I remember the first time I saw the YouTube's awesome, but I remember one of the earliest videos I saw on YouTube was the Flintstones cigarette commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's worth watching because you're just sitting there. You're like, you got to remember it was prime time. Well, since we're yeah, go ahead.
Doctors recommend Lucky Strikes for soothing your throat or something like that.
They're full of vitamins, So,
yeah.
So I was kind of hinting toward you there. I was telling you about having the days off from work. I had to take the time off because of the comp time. I was really like made to stay home, and insomnia hit and stuff. And very rarely does nostalgia actually hit me. I can read this stuff. I can think back on things, but I never had that nostalgia. But there's this other channel called I Love Comics where I'll get on and do a show, I don't know, Tuesday nights. And we did the top 10 X-Men books. So I had all this stuff from the 80s Outlook in the Claremont. And then I had that insomnia night where I had time to think. And for some reason, I got really nostalgic for like 84 and 85. So for you guys that don't, now that we got some people here, I didn't know what we were going to do for a topic. And then Jared was like, we're going to look up this website and we're going to look at comics from April of 1987. I'm like, close enough. So in 1987, since we still got people coming in here, in 1987, I was 14 years old. And I remember for me, it was all about the John Byrne. You know what I mean? Like, it's like John Byrne was already a star. I already knew who he was, but there's like a little bit of a renaissance for me at the spinner racks around town where he was at DC and stuff. You had Keith Giffen. You had Legends ending, so you had like Wonder Woman #1 coming out. You had Burn on Superman. Justice League with Keith Giffen, Jaden Montes was starting, and John Jones said he was 4 months old.
I was in my junior year of college. Yeah, I was at my second school with a lot of my buddies who then went on to work in Marvel Comics with me. So that was at college. When I was away at college, I still had my pull list at my local comic shop. So when I'd come home every month or two, I'd get my comics, but I'd also sometimes, like while I was at college, sometimes we wanted to get off campus and we'd go to Heroes World in Westchester, which was in the White Plains Galleria Mall, and we'd maybe get some comics there. They had discovered Mage at that comic shop, and but it was funny because I can remember I'd come home from college after like maybe 2 months, and I'd have from like $50 to maybe $70 worth of comics there. And I'd be like, holy cow, that's an incredible expensive amount of comics. Nowadays, that's like a week for people because comics are so expensive.
Right. Well, comic book wise, I mean, 87, what was funny is the words you used, I'm glad you cut me off so it's wait for the show, was when you said, 87, we were both becoming men there and all that. When you said that, you don't know how right you were, even though I was 14. But one of the things that I've always done when I've talked to people about comics is I've sort of went back and forth with, like, I know I read it, but wasn't mine because my brother lived with his grandmother and he'd come down on the weekends, every other weekend or whatever. And he was my responsibility. And what we would do is we'd go get, first thing I would do is he'd have his money. He wanted his comic book fix. So I'd walk him over there to two places in walking distance to get our comics. He would get some, I would get some. And then we would just trade reading them. But those were his comics and my comics. No use in me wasting money when I can, you get more comics that way, right? But he had the knack at 10 years old. And after that, he always had the knack to be ahead of the curve on what was going to be big. He was on Rob Liefeld, Cable, and Deadpool before anybody a couple years later.
Right.
I mean, he just had it. You know what I mean? And I think he still has it. And he's quit comics and he just has all that stuff stored up. And he's got he kept his copy of the first appearance of Deadpool. He still has his first Cable. You name a hot book between 1985 and 1995 and he bought it and he knew it. And I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit, but I mean, you know what I mean? Just those 4 years just shows you, I was still more into the classic guys and, like I said, John Byrne, but this guy knew the future, so. But just to share a little story, so this was the year that I consider myself, I actually became a man because there was this girl in 6th grade. I was in 7th grade. I just got my braces the summer before. And let me tell you something, my believe it or not, I had my teeth knocked out when I was a kid. And this is a whole other story, but I actually stayed at a daycare run by Catholic nuns when I was like 3. And I remember having a crush on a nun and I'd give her dandelions. I didn't understand. I didn't know what a nun was.
That's what kids do.
They actually literally kidnapped me and took me to a dentist and had my front teeth pulled after a dentist said, just keep them in. It's his baby teeth. So I had these front 4 teeth gone. I have a picture of me trying to smile look like a vampire. And when the police and stuff found me, I was like licking ice cream with the nun I had a crush on, True story. So my teeth came in really bad. And so as soon as I got those braces, girls noticed me. And I was just like, well, this is different. I've been picked on, everything. I mean, when I walked through a door, you saw my teeth first. When I played football with the kids down the street and all this stuff up in Jewel Ridge, not a game went by where he's on the ground grabbing his head and I'm on the ground grabbing my teeth because we didn't headbutt. I tooth butted them, That's how bad they were. So the 7th grade dance was coming up. I didn't know about etiquette and stuff. I'm a kid that rides a bike, plays out in the woods, stayed out of the house as much as I could. When I was home, I'm playing, looking at D&D that I just discovered and reading these comics. Stop me if you're bored here, So all of a sudden there's this girl in 6th grade that had come in. we had a 7th grade dance coming up, and I was going, and you had to pay to get into the dance and stuff, right? So I get home, and when I talk about being poor, we were poor, and I'm all excited. I hadn't really talked to anybody, but I get home off the bus, and the first thing I want to do, it's like a Friday. First thing I want to do is, catch a ride up there to that dance. I think it was a big deal. We had no money. My money was gone. And I never got told what was done with it. They didn't ask. Right. And I'm told I can't go to this dance. So I'll go in my room and I'm sitting there and I'm like, one more thing. And all of a sudden I don't know what happened. This feeling came over me of like non-defeat is going to happen. And I get up and I start walking to the school. I got a mullet, blue jean jacket, a t-shirt, and it's close to summer, and close to in the summer, and I'm like already breaking out in a sweat. It's so humid. I make it about a mile or two, and my mom pulls up. They broke into my little sister's piggy bank and got change so I could get into this. I walk into the school dance. I had no idea. Everybody's got ties on, just like the dress for church. Here I am, all mullet wearing, just kind of being, nested back. Got my 3 or 4 friends around me, and I see the girl, and I knew nobody was going to ask her to dance because she was gorgeous, and I knew they'd be scared. So I sit there and I just wait my time. She's sitting by herself, just like you can just tell she's dying for somebody to ask her to dance. A slow song came on. I walked right up, called her Christine. I knew her name. I probably didn't know who I was. I was like, Christine, you want to dance? We got up there. So I've done it. I'm a man now. I stood up to everybody. I'm walking. I made my way. This happened. I had a dream and it happened. And then something I didn't expect to happen did it. And I turned into, you ever seen Stan on back in the day on South Park when he would talk to his girlfriend and he would throw up or he couldn't talk? Or he
no.
Okay. I turned into that guy because she looks at me. She's like, oh my God, you're so cool. Everybody here is all dressed up like I was the bad boy in her eyes. And she's telling me how cool I am because I showed up like in my blue jean jacket and my hair.
Your Canadian tuxedo.
I never spoke to her again after that. I just walked away like Edward Scissorhands. After the dance was over, I just walked away like Edward Scissorhands when he
didn't know what to say because she liked you.
Yeah, and I had 5 years of school left with her, and we ended up having a few classes in high school, and it was like I just shut down whenever she got around. And she's on my Facebook.
You never talked to her the rest of school?
Couldn't do it. Dated all kinds of girls, had all kinds of adventures, but when it came to her, I never said anything. And then in 2009, I was living in Roanoke. She found me on Facebook, and some kind of chat came up about school dances. Everybody's kids are old. I said I just took my son to his first school dance. That's what I said. She pops up there and goes, I remember a certain boy who was my first school dance. I jumped up off my desk and was pacing around my room like Edward Scissorhands again. 24 years later, like it was that day, and I did not know what to say. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I've never figured it out.
Well, at least you got some comics.
But I was a man that day.
You asked her to dance. You had no follow through, but sometimes asking to dance is the hardest part.
I was a man for an hour. It counts. Maybe two. All right, we got some people.
I think I asked to dance in 7th grade.
Oh yeah. Well, to tell you the truth, the rest of the dance, it was us in a circle, a bunch of white hillbillies breakdancing in a circle, pointing at each other when it was our turn. Yeah. Okay, we got Paulo in here. He said he couldn't speak English yet, but he was still addicted to comics in '87. Yeah. Undisputed Frost is here. Now, there's a name I haven't seen in a while. He pops up on my Facebook.
He's too busy making those sports card videos. That's what it is.
That's his new thing.
Anymore.
Okay.
He's now into getting autographs through the mail and sports cards and stuff.
Nice. Great amount of comic knowledge right here. Just with these, just with these two hippies. Leave these two hippies alone is what he's trying to say. Sleepy readers out there, good morning. Paulo and Sleepy Reader are talking, and Friar Tuck is out there. All right, so you ready to go back to 1987? I'm going to do the screen share here. We'll go back and forth here, play around with it. So now we're going to go back to April of 1987
and see what comics we got that month.
All right. Now, this is the site that Jared said we could use. I haven't been on this in years. They've been around for a while, and you can actually go back and see what books came out in what month in what year. So, that top row, huh?
Amazing Man special. I actually got that.
Well, the only Amazing Man I really want, and I had, and it disappeared, was the one where Frank Miller actually he put himself in the Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller did the
one everyone wants. That's the one issue that is you always see because everyone wants it. But I actually bought Amazing. Listen, I wasn't buying that many Marvel or DCs in '87, but I was getting Amazing Man. That's one of the, because that one was real different. It was kind of this comedy slice of life comic, and I think it was done by one of their production guys. Or one of their ex-production guys. I can't remember who did it.
Well, I'm totally going to go ahead and tell you that. Let me see if I click on it. Nope. This says it came out April 28th, 1987. But I remember I didn't pick up the book because I thought it was like a rip on Forbush Man,
Bob Rozakis wrote it, and Stefan DiStefano was the penciler, it says. And I think he worked in the, like I said, I think he worked in the DC bullpen at some time. So I remember reading that in Amazing Man, but it was a long time ago, so my memory might be wrong.
Yeah.
I think I still have my Amazing Mans, but I don't, I haven't had them out in a long, long time.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, I think Amazing Man would have been bigger if it was an indie book. I mean, this was trying to come out in the middle of the grim and gritty days,
It was a DC indie book kind of thing. You're right. I mean, that's why I was buying it, because I wasn't buying, the regular stuff. Mm-hmm. But it really was like a little indie book from DC. What else we got? The NAM. Was Michael Golden still on the NAM then?
At least doing covers or not. I've actually met him. He signed my first issue and a few things in the NAM, but I can't believe they were just on number 8 in 1987. Man,
he was in the 90s. He was art director at Marvel for a little time. Yeah. So I knew him. Real nice guy.
Yeah. And then we got the 2 Superman books. I'm going to jump ahead here, but the Action and the Superman by Marv Wolfman, Jerry Ordway, and John Byrne doing his thing. I was all over those. Yeah. During the 80s, if it had John Byrne got it, I was totally a fanboy for him. I could, admit that I was a fanboy for somebody there. But the stuff that it was really odd. I liked what John Byrne was doing with his books, but Marv Wolfman was overshadowed. And Marv Wolfman was actually the guy who, it was his idea to bring in John Byrne. It was his idea to have Lex Luthor go all, corporate, the bad guy of the 80s. And then this is when they had that Ruby and Spears cartoon, I think.
I never liked the Kingpin Lex Luthor. I much preferred the mad scientist Lex Luthor.
I wasn't really into it until they had that biography of Lex Luthor one-shot come out.
Yeah.
Like that was cool.
I remember the cover to that, but I never read it. I think I got those 2 issues of Airboy. I was collecting that at the time. It was a bi-weekly.
Are they
it had a lower price and it was only like 18 pages or something.
Yeah.
But it came out bi-weekly. That's why there's 2 of them. Who was drawing it?
Yeah, when it comes to these indie books, like I said, I did not have access to any kind of comic book shop back then, but I'd get the Comic Scene and whatever, any magazine that had anything to do with comic book news, and I would see articles for this and the clips and stuff. I wonder if these were by Chuck Dixon, because I heard great things about Airboy.
It's funny. I just clicked on them and it said that the only credit it gave was Tim Truman, editor, and I was like, "That's all you got?"
Oh, Truman's all here.
Yeah, I was a Truman fan, so I was buying his stuff. Amazing Heroes. I was buying. I don't remember. I don't know if I got those issues of Amazing Heroes, but I bought Amazing Heroes a bit. It's funny because I always say to them when I'm talking about, especially when I was young, 14, 15, 16, or in high school, I'm always go, "Oh, we heard about that." And I don't know where I heard about it. I'm like, what was I reading when I was 15 because I read anything I could get on comics, I would read. But I'm like, where did I read about what was upcoming in comics? I have no idea, because it was before the age of the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that, like I said, when I was 15, my local comic shop opened up. I didn't start going regularly until I was 16. So I'm like, where was I reading all of this stuff about comics? I'm not even sure. But I'd get stuff like Amazing Heroes and Comics Journal when I could. But I don't think that was until high school.
Well, Amazing Heroes, of course, this wasn't on the newsstand. Like I said, my big one was Comic Scene. But Amazing Heroes, I'll find these books for 50 cents and $1, and I tell people to get them. I mean, Amazing Heroes had the best interviews with creators and stuff. I've got one about Crisis on Infinite Earth that tells you more than anything I've read on it, you know, from Perez and Wolfman there. Now, American Flag was notorious, man, because like I said, there's a few guys in town that did get some of the indie books. And I found out real quick what American Flag was about, and I just chuckled. You know,
I was done with American Flag by issue 43. I was really in because Howard Chaykin stopped drawing it. I bought American Flag whatever year it came out, and I was really into it. I really enjoyed it, but then it just kind of petered out for me. I haven't read it since. What's funny is only in the last 5 years have I started reading Howard Chaykin's stuff again. Because I liked Howard Chaykin's stuff in the 70s. I liked Howard Chaykin's stuff in American Flag. And then he kind of started doing mainstream DC stuff a lot for. And it's like all through the late 80s and the 90s, I didn't read any Howard Chaykin. And then it was only like a few years ago, I think when he did Black Kiss 2, that I was like, you know what? I want to read some Howard Chaykin again. And now I've been reading his stuff. And I actually met him for the first time like 2 or 3 years ago. I had a real fun time. I actually went to a one of the they used to be the Big Apple cons in New York City. I forget what they're called now. The same guy runs them. They're in April in New York City usually. And I'm friends with Bob Wyachek, as you know. And he was like, "Oh, want to come to the con with me?" I was like, "Sure." So I was hanging out at Bob's table at the con, you know, talking to people I know, and Howard Chaykin was sitting next to him. So I got to chat with Howard Chaykin for a good part of the day. Had a lot of fun.
Oh, cool. Howard Chaykin's, my favorite work of Howard Chaykin is his Thrill Killers, which is kind of a Batman, Batgirl, and Robin story. Right there in the early 60s. It actually feels real pulpy. And it was right when there was still beatniks, right before the hippies popped up. And it actually, when I read that, I actually feel like I could have been there at that time. It's just,
I don't know that one at all.
Oh, it's awesome. I got it on the shelf there. I think there's 2 little miniseries. I ran across it by accident and was like, this is fantastic. All right. Hopefully this is still working here.
What else we got?
Well, I'm going to skip down here a little bit. This Batman annual with an Alan Moore story. This is one of those books that I buy. This is a book that has to have a home every time I run across it cheap.
Okay.
The Clayface story is really good. He falls in love with a mannequin. I know there's maybe 2 stories in it. One other story probably in there. It's good as well. But this is one of those Alan Moore stories that's under the radar. That's just solid.
Oh, I don't know that one at all. I didn't know he did a story to Batman annual.
Right. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I wasn't buying a ton of Marvel and DC at this time. So.
Oh, yeah. Some of those little known DC Alan Moore books, I know they've been reprinted in like the universe of Alan Moore, but I was on top of these. I can give myself credit. I was on top of these. I would spot his name and there'd be a ton of those left on the rack. You know, I'm like, you guys are missing out. And here's the obligatory Booster Gold. I'm not going to cuss.
I never bought. I may have bought the first issue of Booster Gold, and that was it. I may have bought the first issue of Boris the Bear, and that was it. But I read his appearances in Dark Horse Presents. I think it was. That's actually a video I want to make, just showing off. It's like I bought Dark Horse Presents off the stands from the beginning to the end. So I think it was 157 issues. So I have all 157 issues. So I was like, you know what? I should make a video just showing off the covers, because who else is ever going to do that?
The cool thing about Boris the Bear is I got a couple of issues. Like I think it was like 1990. I bought, I finally hit a comic book shop the year before and got to go back. So I was just like grabbing anything that was cheap at the time. And Boris the Bear, I still have the Swamp Thing issue called Something, where the Swamp Thing is actually made out of comic books. Boris the Bear satirized and went after everything in comics that came out. You know, they just like this cover, they're making fun of the 25th anniversary of Marvel and stuff. It was good satire. It's just I don't know what was missing from the book. It should have been bigger. I think Mike Richardson, the guy that owned Dark Horse, wrote that himself.
Huh.
Yeah, and then
what the heck is Bullet Crow from Eclipse?
This right here, no idea. That's the first time I've ever
that
seen
at all.
this.
Bullet Crow, huh? No clue.
None. I actually,
I'm an indie guy. I was probably buying plenty of Eclipse comics at the time, so I don't know what the heck that is. Bullet Crow.
Yeah, no idea. This right here, the Care Bears. Believe it or not, I knew full-grown men that were buying the Care Bear books. It was because it was Marvel. It was Marvel cartoon books that were early, even they were in their Star brand. In their eyes, they were getting something that was going to be worth money. Because it's early Marvel.
I wonder if those were the Sid Jacobson edited comics. Let me see. Yeah. He was doing Marvel. Yeah, Sid Jacobson. I met Sid Jacobson when I first worked at Marvel. He was working there in the very early 90s. Really nice guy. But I only found out later he'd been an editor, not at Marvel. He'd been an editor at who are Dell, Gold Key, or Harvey, some of that comic book, like all the way back in the 50s, he was an editor there. And Marvel actually hired him in the 80s to edit their Star line of comics, because that was, the Star comics were all the kid stuff, and it was a lot like the Dell, Gold Key, Harvey stuff. But I didn't realize that, I was only 22 at the time, so I had no idea that he went all the way back in time to these other companies. And it's like when I found that out later after he wasn't there anymore, I'm like, I wish I had known that. But he was a really nice guy, really kind of old school too. He seemed like he was out of the 1950s. He was like a really nice, sweet guy, but he came off of as this kind of gruff, no nonsense kind of editor. That wasn't like all the other editors at Marvel were kind of these, Marvel they were once Marvel Comics fans. So they were kind of more youngish comics fans. Sid Jacobson was like in the suit, all business, 1950s comic book editor. So he really stood out, but really nice guy he was. But I wish I could have talked to him even more now that I knew he went back all the way in time editing. And the one thing I also remember him doing was he still had all his artists drawing twice up. So they were all drawing on 16 by 20 paper, because he thought he got more, they put more into the artwork if they were drawing that size. So he was the only one at Marvel, because original art is usually done at 11 by 17, which is 1.5 times up.
Well, I'll tell you what, just from somebody on the outside here, maybe you can correct me here, but it sounds like these books were in capable hands, because these were licensed properties. You know what I mean? They were important not to hurt the brand. Is that a good way to put it? Yeah.
Like I said, Sid Jacobson was a pro. He was, this was not his first rodeo.
Nice.
And he did all the Star Comics stuff.
I don't know if it was under Star. I know I was getting Defenders of the Earth, and I tried out the He-Man book, and that I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I think DC handled He-Man and the Masters of the Universe better than Marvel did. I don't know what happened there, but I want to jump over here to the Centurions. For anybody not in the know, this was a toy brand. This was a commercial for toys, but Centurions, Jack Kirby had a hand in those. So I had those. Yeah. Jack Kirby helped design those toys or something.
And right next to that is Cerebus, which I wish I was buying at the time.
Well,
I'm telling you,
go ahead.
I waited the longest time to start. But as an indie guy, you think I would have, it was one of the first indie books. You think I would have jumped all over it. For some reason, I didn't. And I didn't start buying Cerebus till, I don't know, the mid 90s.
Well, this is around the time Cerebus to me in comics is actually a staple of the 80s. Right. I knew about Cerebus from Epic Illustrated since I was like 7 or 8 years old. I knew who he was. I was curious. I somehow knew about Marvel's soon, going after Dave Sim. And then they brought in a character in New Mutants number 14 that was like a demon who was named Sim, S-Y-M with an apostrophe. And I was just curious about this guy. And I kept hearing about this book. Turtles hit. And Cerebus popped up in there, and they said, so it was really odd. Out of all the indie books, at a young age, it was Cerebus that was in the background, no matter you heard about it, whether you had a way to or not. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And so you would have think I jumped. It's like I was on ElfQuest early. I was on every indie book I could get my hands on, but for some reason I never got Cerebus.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no explanation for it.
Well, I could reach back here. I'm rereading all the Cerebus. My goal is to get issue 25 through 300, and I think I only need like 70 issues. But I've got the up here on my shelf. I have all the phone books, and I'm on Going Home. That one. And I used to tell people just read the first 150 issues of Cerebus. That's all you need. And because Dave Sim himself said he should have just done 250 issues. Then I was like, now that I read them continuously, I'm like, okay, first 200, stick with those. I'll finish the next volume. I'm like, I'm up into the 230s, man. This thing reads so much better when you read it as one big long story like it was designed to be.
Like I jumped on it with the phone book edition. Well, actually, first I get Cerebus Biweekly,
right,
which was a reprint series in the early 90s. So that's why I was like, you know what, the reprint, I may as well start at the beginning. So I was buying Cerebus Biweekly. I think I got the first 25 issues of that before he stopped publishing it. Then I'm like, well, I may as well get the phone book editions now. So then the mid 90s to the late 90s, I was buying the phone book editions whenever they'd come out. Then the early 2000s hit. There was maybe, I don't know, 50 issues left, so 25 to 50 issues left. And I said, you know what? I want to be on this reading it monthly at the end. So I put it on my pull list finally, and was maybe the last 2 phone book editions I never got because I was reading the issues. But those last 25 issues were just tough to read because they were Cerebus old and dying, and he's basically writing his own Bible.
Yeah.
So it's Sim dealing with a lot of religious issues. And it was just kind of like, well, by that time, the actual letters page in Cerebus was more interesting than the actual comic because people were debating all sorts of stuff in the letters page. But the actual comic was like, I don't need any more of Cerebus contemplating scripture.
Well, a lot of this had to do with Sim having some mental issues also. He was going from an atheist to where he supposedly was doing research and religion for Cerebus.
His own religion.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's like Jewish, Christian, Islamic. He just kind of created his own mishmash. And he was also, I would say, a born-again horn dog. Kind of a reformed horn dog. You know how they say sometimes that
he's supposedly been celibate since the 80s.
Right. Reformed smokers are like the worst when it comes to anti-smoking, telling people they shouldn't smoke and this and that, and they're the most annoying. Well, I think he's a reformed horn dog, and he became the most annoying at telling people they shouldn't be a horn dog anymore. And it's just kind of like,
the hypocrisy. I get you. Yeah. But I tell you what, so far, I'm thinking issue 250 might be the cutoff Cerebus before he gets into the religious stuff like you're talking about.
You'll know when you can't read it anymore because you'll be like, oh my God, I can't read this anymore. I almost want to go back and reread them and see if they're still as tough to read as they were when I first read them. Because I read them all. It was only one issue a month.
What is it? I don't have my glasses, but I've got one volume where it went really bad with the religious stuff, and actually that volume, that phone book, is a little bit pricey because nobody was buying Cerebus back then.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, here's the ironic thing, in my opinion, as the stories went down, the art got superb. It's like, you could just flip through and look at the art and be fine.
Beautiful stuff.
I met Gahard couple years ago at Heroes Con. He and his wife. I would move in with those people. He was so cool, and he gives out stickers to people. These little medals. They look like a little first prize medal or something. I've got it here somewhere, and it's the medal is if you've read all 300 issues of Cerebus. So, and he doesn't quiz you. He takes your word on it. But he's a great guy, and his art for those issues, you just not read it and just be amazed by his pen and ink work. It's amazing. He builds models of streets so he can have a model to go by for Cerebus. He builds rooms it's just amazing the stuff he did. I tell you what, you want to look at the comments because
I'll
when I
check it.
over a minute ago, somebody had a question for you.
Sleepy Readers here. He says, good morning. Friar Tuck liked your story that you were telling earlier about becoming a man. Red Vitamin Blue, just for some additional context. The #1 Billboard song of April 1987. Starship, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us. I could do without Starship. Mr. Gretzky, he didn't see a shop until 1992. Okay. Friar Tuck, what wipe set are you looking at? Mike's Amazing World of Comics or Mike's Amazing World? I can't remember which one it is.
April,
and you go to the newsstand section and you can look up what comics came out. Scott Neely, what are they looking at? Mike's Amazing World of Comics. We're looking at the comics that came out in April of 1987. Scott Neely, I have all 3 Centurion comics and I have all the toys. He loves the Centurions. Paulo Costa, Doc Terror had Hulk's face and Hacker looked like the Absorbing Man. Okay.
Doc Terror, wow.
I don't remember that. Let's see.
I get Doc Terror and Mr. Monster mixed up in my head, but I know what he's talking about.
Fenner 27 picked up the Dynamo Joe in back issue bins. I think I had the first issue of Dynamo Joe, and he also started reading ElfQuest this past year, and it's amazing. I haven't reread ElfQuest in a while, but I really loved like the first 20 issues when they came out, the original ElfQuest stuff. Mr. Gretzky asks, Jared, did you get Normal Man? I did get Normal Man. I enjoyed, that's where I first ran into Jim Valentino in Normal Man. And I can tell you which I was shocked when Jim Valentino became one of the hot comic artists in the early 90s. Because I know him as the Normal Man guy, and I know him as he made, he was part of the autobiographical comics movement in the 80s too. So he did so when he showed up on Guardians of the Galaxy, I was like, what? And I'll tell you a funny Jim Valentino comic story. He did a comic, it was the late 80s or early 90s, called Valentino. And it was one of his autobiographical comics. And I can remember the first issue had come out, and my local comic shop had like one of those displays at the front where you can put like a bunch of comics in a cardboard display. Mm-hmm. And that was the new comic for that week, Valentino #1. So they had it up there. And it was a picture sort of like Robert Crumb-ish, Keep on Trucking-ish. You know, with Valentino, it was him like walking forward and it had his foot, coming forward kind of thing. Sort of a Keep on Trucking-ish image.
Yeah.
I can remember he had he didn't have any shoes on in the picture. He had bare feet. And I remember that just because as I'm standing there, there's these two, and I'm 20 years old, and there's these two 12-year-olds in the comic shop looking at the latest comic. And the one looks over at the Valentino comic there and turns to his friend and says with a little bit of disgust, who'd buy a comic with starring a guy with bare feet? And that just made me crack up. And I'm like, remember, never put bare feet. I'm just like, who would buy a comic with a guy and starring a guy in bare feet? And I'm just like, all right, there's something you can't do in a comic. The guy have bare feet. And I was like, there's something I never would have thought of in a million years.
I hope I remember this. But there's a story I'm going to tell you off air. It's just like you'll like it. Oh my God, that's now Valentino. Valentino to me,
Normal Man from In Stock. Have you ever read Normal Man?
I read Normal Man a few issues. I actually looked it up online, and I remember enjoying it. But it goes back to Cerebus. The Roach character in Cerebus. He'll parody other heroes. He didn't. He was Normal Man for a few issues after Jocka's story, I think. Yeah, that's where I found Normal Man.
I've always meant to go back and reread it. I still have my issues, but I haven't.
But Valentino, just to touch on him becoming big on Guardians of the Galaxy, I always liked it because Valentino made a reader, in my opinion, made a reader feel like he could have been one of them. He wasn't the most polished artist, but he got it through merit. It was like he took what he could do. He knew his strengths, and Guardians of the Galaxy ended up being one. I mean, I was a big Oh my God, I can't believe I'm one blank. I was a big Yondu fan since I was like 5.
Okay, right.
I was a Thor annual. So I'm there to see Yondu, and I'm like, I hope he doesn't screw it up. And he wrote the great comic that came out of that wave of books, came out in the 1990, Quasar, She-Hulk, McFarlane, Spider-Man. And a lot of people were talking more about his book than those other superstars. Cause I mean, I just love that he got everything. His recognition felt like it came through merit, and you could be him. You know what I mean? It was awesome.
Have you ever heard the apocryphal Valentino story about the founding of Image Comics?
Oh no.
Which I think has been denied. Well, the story went around that they're having one of the early meetings of all the Image Comics guys founding Image Comics.
Right.
And it's credited to Todd McFarlane, the salty one, saying, if we're the best of the best in comics right now, what's Valentino doing here?
Oh.
Now, that story is completely apocryphal. I think it's been denied, but it's still funny. Even if it never actually happened, it's still a funny story.
Well, I just know about the story of the reason Rob Liefeld left is they had a meeting and he knew about it, and he was able to get the hotel room beside of them. They had a connecting door, and he admitted to being down on the ground trying to look under the door listening to him. So I think anything's possible with those guys. You know.
Right.
All right. Now I'm gonna go back over here. And this classic X-Men. This is a series that you still need to pick up the back issues of because it surprised me. And I got an embarrassing story over number 1. But what Claremont did, this is what actually brought me around in the late 80s to the X-Men. I was kind of contrary. Everybody was talking about X-Men, so I wasn't really that into them. But what Claremont did is they allowed Claremont to do backup stories in this that took place at the same time as these reprints. And some of the issues have new pages in them. In between the original story. So if you want to be a completist with the X-Men, that classic X-Men stuff, you need
I like a lot. I want to collect them at least digitally. Some because nowadays for comics that I only want for their covers, I collect them digitally. I just like find the image of the cover online somewhere and put it in a file. But they had a lot of good new covers on there. Oh, and Paulo Costa tells us Liefeld and Larson knew Valentino from their indie days. He could teach Image guys how to self-publish. There we go.
Nice. When I bought the first issue of this, of Classic X-Men, I just had it out the other day. That's what's so funny. I got my X-Men box on the floor over here. But in the first issue, it's got a classic image by Art Adams. But when you looked on the inside cover, it had all the X-Men standing around, and Storm is front and center. And I was standing in line with one of my buddies waiting to buy this book, and I opened it up, and I wasn't ready for that image. I remember I'm like 13, and I went, oh, wow, like that when I saw it. I mean, I wasn't expecting to do that. All of a sudden, I hear my mom behind me that I didn't know was there going, oh, wow, really? So my mom caught me eyeballing Storm at a very bad moment. I was not a pervert at that time,
There's Conan Saga, which you mentioned, which had some really nice covers and reprints.
Barry Windsor Smith
stuff, right? I had not bought Conan in ages by, I think, was that number 196? I'd stopped. I found that was John Buscema still drawing Conan then?
I think he'd come back. He went back and forth on that book a lot, and that looks like a Buscema cover. I mean,
Val Simics and Jeff Isherwood were doing it, but there was some during this era, or maybe before, there was some John Buscema stuff that I found, very thin.
Yeah.
In terms of, he looked like he was just doing breakdowns and he wasn't getting master embellishing on them. And I kind of lost my taste for Conan. I don't know when it was, around issue 160, 170, somewhere in there.
See, Conan.
Next to that is Crossfire.
Yeah, let me switch over here. I'm interrupting you because I can't see you talking. As soon as I hear a pause, I'm like, I'm there. Conan in my house was real interesting because he never went out of style. Conan and Gene Simmons' Kiss was in my house from the beginning. He never died. We had the VHS tapes. The pulp books were always around. So when it came to the comic and stuff and the magazines, they were always there. I mean, there were magazines from 1979 of the Savage Sword of Conan, and there were comic books from the 70s and early 80s. He was just always there in my house. I mean, he's not, to me, he's not dated. He never really blew me away because he was just there, you know. But the Conan saga, the Barry Windsor Smith, I think this was magazine size. So you would use off the magazine racks, even if you didn't, you know. And I want to comment here on the DP7 stuff and the Spitfire, the new universe. I hung in there with the new universe. I was like everybody else that thought we were getting our new universe from the Marvel. If you missed in 1961, here's your second chance to be on the ground level. So I ended up not buying a lot of really good books because, you know, I was limited.
I bought Jim Shooter and J.R. Jr.'s Star Brand and enjoyed that, but that was the only universe but next to that is Crossfire, which I really that's by Mark Evanier and Dan Spiegel. Dan Spiegel was an old pro by that time, and I found the I actually still have all my issues. I want to go back. I reread some of them a few years ago, but it's like I was actually. There's maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30 issues, and I was missing a few of them. And when I discovered mycomicshop.com, like, I don't even know, 10 or 15 years ago, I filled in my Crossfire issues. That was one of the things I'm like, you know what? I just want the 3 issues I'm missing. And they were only like $2 a piece.
I'm thinking it was like 1989, but Marv Wolfman came in, and for Total Eclipse's anniversary or something, he did a Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of book for them called Total Eclipse. And one of the issues is worth a little bit of money because it has one of Neil Gaiman's first comic book stories in it, Miracle Man, right? But I actually talked to Marv Wolfman about this a couple years ago. I just sort of looked over at him and was like, what was up with that Total Eclipse story? He went, none of those characters should have ever been together. I was doing a favor for the guy. I don't, you know, he's as a favor, and he just shook his head about the whole thing. He was like, that never should have happened. I liked his blunt honesty.
Yeah. Well, there's one Crossfire cover that goes for some money, the issue, because it's Dave Stevens cover with Marilyn Monroe on the cover. It's like Crossfire number 6 or something like that. That's the one you can never find in any dollar bin, people say, because that's the issue that everybody buys. Nice. For that Dave Stevens cover. But Mark Evanier, the actual Mark Evanier has a blog you can read now that's pretty good. But it's kind of started in Crossfire when he used to write these essays in the back about his time working in Hollywood, which he still does. He's still working, and there were some really good essays about working in Hollywood that I really enjoyed in those issues of Crossfire. Sometimes more than the comic itself. Yeah. Which, like I said, I've grown to like Dan Spiegel's art even more over the years. There's a certain old school stiffness to it that kind of left me cold on occasion. But
I'm not going to comment because I'm realizing I'm getting arts. Wait a minute. There's Dan Spiegelman and Art Spiegel.
Dan Spiegel and Art Spiegelman.
I get them confused. Yeah. I'm not going to say anything.
Spiegel did some interesting Black Hawk work with Mark Evanier in the 80s too.
Yes.
He was one of those guys that was solid but never spectacular in my eyes. I always kind of liked him, and I loved his craftsmanship, but he was never like exciting.
Yeah, he's never a superstar. I've got some kind of Mike Hammer like graphic novel here that he did of somebody. I don't know what it is. I just know that I have it. And it kind of reminded me of like trying to be a little bit film noir, but it was a real cartoony style. I think the guy drove a cab or something. Jumping over here to this detective comic, we were trying to remember who the villain was in this, but this is a McFarlane cover, the year 2. This is right before McFarlane jumped over to Marvel. And I knew him from his Infinity Incorporated stuff. One of my buddies had some of those issues with him, but this is the first time I really noticed McFarlane were these 2 detective covers that he did for the storyline.
Do you know the most famous detective, the one that everybody shows off on YouTube all the time, the Batman with the moon behind him, McFarlane cover?
Yeah.
Did you ever Todd? I follow Todd McFarlane. I don't follow many creators on social media, but Todd McFarlane's one of them. It's funny, the creators whose stuff I actually like, I don't follow, but the creators whose stuff I'm kind of indifferent to, I can follow. And Todd McFarlane's one of the guys because he's interesting. And he's like, "Do you want me to ruin this cover for you forever to show you the mistake in it?" And I was like, "All right." And I never saw it before either. But in the moon behind him, with Batman standing there with his cape going all out and whatever. And at one point, there's like there's an area where the moon should be showing through his cape, and like the moon is all colored white, and that area that's showing through his cape is yellow for some reason instead of white, or vice versa. But there's like one little area that should be white, but instead is yellow. If his color is just messed up, or the separator just messed up. And it's like, now every time I look at it, I see that.
See, I passed that book up many times because I don't like the cover. It's all cape. I mean, that's all I see. I see a bunch of, I think the one we just saw here is better. I
don't think I've seen this one before.
Yeah. Did I already pass it up here? Let me see. Let me go up here.
Batman Year 2, Part 2.
Yeah. Yeah, there it is. If it's showing up. He's got the Batman symbol on his or her sickle. I cannot remember the. Look at this! It says McFarlane did do the art in this. I got to dig these out. I remember Alan Davis doing it, maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
This is like the Dark Horse Presents issue number 6. Wow, that was only on issue 6 then, huh?
Yeah,
I thought it came out. It must have come out in '86 then. I thought it came out in '84. I guess I got my years wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dark Horse Presents from the beginning to the end.
Cool. Well, I'm going to jump down here to the Elric. I've got a bunch of these. Yeah, I actually was able to get a lot of these books from First Comics for, I think I got something like 20 some books for 99 cents in 2010, $1 back in the day. And I was able to replace, I had Corn by Mike Mignola, a bunch of these Elric miniseries that are each by books and stuff like that. And I was able to replace almost everything I had, because I've been dragging those things around since the early 90s. These are actually really good to get. I always push Elric on people. Solid storytelling if you want to read.
I just noticed that was a Jan Dersimo one.
Yeah,
of course, the Craig Russell ones are my favorite because I'm a huge Craig Russell fan.
Yeah, the Elric stories that he did for Topps Comics. Craig Russell is one of the guys I actually got to meet at Baltimore Con. And I didn't try to get him to sign any Sandman or anything. I brought a bunch of Elric stuff.
I never met him before, but I've been, ever since I've been a fan of his since his Killraven stuff.
Yep.
I've just always loved his stuff. I buy anything he does too.
What was that? Amazing Adventures, Amazing Worlds.
Amazing Adventures, like in the 30s.
Yeah, if you go back and look at those, you would not believe that's art from the 70s. He was so ahead of his time.
Ooh, Elf Lord. I remember buying some of those issues.
Yeah.
And Elementals. I used to buy, when Bill Willingham was doing Elementals, I was buying that. I think it was, I don't know if he was still doing it at this time.
Elementals, I turned one of my buddies onto that and stuff. That first volume of Elementals should be required reading. It starts out, you can tell that it has some of the, tropes of what what an indie book was back then. They made sure there was like a little bit of sex in there and a little morbid stuff. But by the time they got to the 3rd or 4th issue, Bill Willingham just exploded on that book, man. He brought in some evil demons, and the Elementals basically they were killed and then came back to life. So they talk a lot about them actually being dead and how they come back to life if they do get killed in the book. It's real interesting. It started out to me as an X-Men clone book and became something totally on its own.
The Willingham stuff was then somehow in like the late 80s, it turned into a porno book.
Well, what happened was the lore. I need to look this up, but when I turned my buddy onto it, Tim Anderson, that I talk about a lot, he did a little bit of research and he called me up and, when we were talking about the book, and he said basically Willingham lost the rights. Some guy bought him up, and he's just holding them back, being a hole about it. And they were doing some stuff to that book to try to make it sell and to piss Bill Willingham off. So the first volume and the first 2 volumes are the ones I tell people are really good.
It's funny.
I got my first. Oh, go ahead.
the first place I saw Bill Willingham was on those Dungeons and Dragons ads on the back of comics in like the early 80s.
Well, that's just it. When I bought my first issue, and I still have it here somewhere. It's volume 2. Okay, I bought my first issue of the Elementals because I recognized Bill Willingham's name at a Walden Books.
Me too.
I bought the issue 6 of Sandman and my first Elementals at the same time, the same day. I remember that day very well.
I bought Elementals when it came out, the first issue at the comic shops, whatever year that was, because I was like, oh, the Dungeons and Dragons guy is doing a comic.
And that's exactly why I picked up Elementals. I knew who he was. I read the credits. I had all the books, monster manuals, player handbooks, DM guide, deities and demigods. I can go on and on and on. So I knew these artists' names, right up there with Gary Gygax. I mean, I was like, when I saw Bill Willingham on that, I'm like, is that the same guy? And as soon as I saw that splash page, that first page, I was like, yep, that's him. I was like, So Bill Willingham. I'm so glad you know him from the TSR stuff. That's
right. Because he would sign it. He got to sign it too. So, but a very distinctive signature.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the first 2 volumes of Elementals I highly recommend. I mean, they just become their own thing, twists and turns. And now the Fantastic Four. This was a sad time. And it shouldn't have been, but Byrne had left to go do Superman, and they brought in Steve Englehart, Sal Buscema, John Buscema. Yeah, I mean, all of them were on this book, and it was just a very sad time. About a year or 2 later, after Shooter left, they did Secret Wars 3 in an issue, and they completely made the Beyonder obsolete as a way to get back at Jim Shooter.
And one before it, I want to show you, if you ever get a chance to pick up some issues of French Ice, go ahead and do it.
Oh, there
French
it is.
Ice featuring Carmen Crew. It was a popular French comic strip. And it's just about this cranky old woman who lives in an apartment in Paris or wherever. And it's just a funny comic strip about a mean old woman. And I still have my issues of it. I'm going to reread it one day, but I very much enjoyed French Ice. If you ever want to see, some comic strip you've never heard of, that's well written and well drawn about just this cranky old woman, pick up that. I mean, you'll probably find the issues in some quarter box somewhere if anyone has them, but it was good stuff. French Ice, definitely worth the read.
Yeah, I've never seen that, so I'll keep an eye out for it.
It's not one anyone knows exists anymore. So I figured I'd point it out just because I do whenever I have a chance. Because I saw someone on YouTube in the last few years actually had an issue of it. I'm like, oh, look at that.
Nice. Now, these G.I. Joe books, there are people who were into G.I. Joe, not into comics, but man, they got these books. Yeah. G.I. Joe. Now, this book here, I don't know if anybody's interested, but something about this book. This is the book that keeps creeping up in my collection. Like, I don't know how it moves around the boxes. It's the one book that stays in mint condition no matter what. But like, I can go through a random box, and this book just moves around in my collection. This one right here. I don't know what makes it special. I don't know what it's possessed by. But I remember buying the book, and no matter when I was doing shelves, when I started doing boxes, this thing moves around freely in all my boxes. And I've only read it twice, when I bought it.
Green Lantern Corps was Green Lantern, and they changed the name of it, right?
Yeah, in issue 201. Yeah.
Okay. And was there a Green Lantern? Did they launch a new Green Lantern book?
They did a couple years later in the early 90s. But what happened was, you had Crisis on Infinite Earths happen. And they were building up with Guy Gardner coming in. John Stewart had been a Green Lantern. Hal Jordan was just lost. That's why he didn't pop up in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And Steve Englehart came on there, and they just took advantage of the Crisis on Infinite Earths and made it about the Corps. We got the first appearance of Kilowog and all that stuff. And then in the 220s, they canceled the book. But my God, they brought back Gil Kane, and they told this fantastic story taking place on Oa, where the battery was dying, and it turns out he was trapped in it. And I mean, it was fantastic. And Bill Willingham came in and did a few issues of Green Lantern around Millennium, that crossover. Sorry.
Paolo just posted, French Ice Carmen Crew comes from Fluide Glacial. That was the best indie humor comic magazine in France. Okay, that's where it comes from. Oh, and next to it, have you ever read Grendel?
Yeah, I have a few buddies who are big time into Grendel. Scotty X, who used to have a channel and a bunch of them.
Yeah,
Grendel's hit and miss for me. I read the book. I totally get why people are into it.
right.
But I mean, I'll find a story around then that blows me away. I loved when Matt Wagner did the Batman and Grendel miniseries.
I didn't discover Mage till the end of Mage. So Grendel was originally a backup in Mage, besides his 2 appearances in that Kamiko primer or whatever it is. And so I originally got the graphic novel when they collected all this. They collected all the stuff from Mage in a graphic novel called Grendel Devil by the Deed by Matt Wagner. I really, really liked that one. And then they came out with, and Grendel died at the end of it. I mean, that's one of the funny things is Grendel dies at the end of his own first story, and he stays dead. But then what they did was, and they go back and tell his story many other times.
I read an issue of Grendel, and the only thing I remember from it is that it sort of had like this book of Grendel in the back of it or something, and it went into what they started doing at some point where a Grendel will take the baby out of the womb of a female and put it in the male, so it'll be stronger or something.
What happened was, like I said, then they came out with the Grendel ongoing series, and they had sort of his stepdaughter inherit. They made Grendel be sort of a demonic figure that not quite possesses people but corrupts them.
Okay.
So his stepdaughter decided to become Grendel and be a hero eventually, but she, over the first 12 issues, she slowly got corrupted by the idea of Grendel. And then the next 3 were some of my favorites by, what's the guy? All of a sudden I forget his name. He did The Jam. He did Bernie Marault, that's his name. He did like 3 issues after she was corrupted and something happened to her where her friend, this reporter, got corrupted. But then like Matt Wagner seemed to have less to do with it, and I got less interested in it. And they started this whole thing where like the latest Grendel series takes place thousands of years, and Grendel became its own kind of it became a religion, this whole Grendel thing, and took over the world. And I didn't read a lot of those issues because they were not done. A lot of them were not done by Wagner, and I just wasn't interested in them. But the original Grendel stuff, like right here, the Christine Spar stuff, is really good. The Panda Brothers drew that too.
I've got a box here where I've at least got like 30 issues of just random Grendel stuff from Kamiko to Dark Horse.
Anything done by Matt Wagner himself is really good. Anything done with Matt Wagner as the writer is generally good. But the other stuff,
The skaters of the 90s around here used to have Grendel mask, and they would go around to the cemeteries and they would find like an angel statue or something and put the mask on all these angels and take pictures. Grendel,
right now there's a new Grendel series that Matt Wagner is doing that I'm enjoying. But it's Grendel Prime, which many years in the future, the Grendel Prime is like the head religious figure or something, but he's basically a superhero too. And it's this total sci-fi story with this Grendel Prime is off exploring worlds to find some place to move his people to.
Awesome.
So it's like completely different than Hunter Rose, the original Grendel. Completely different.
Paulo put up a comment right when you started talking about that. And he talking about the same story. This was Orion Asante who becomes pregnant with his son, but then they were already in the 27th century and nobody remembered Hunter Rose, only Grendel. That's the story I think I came on to Grendel on. That's probably the only one I read.
Well, go back and read Devil by the Deed. That's the best. That's the first and one of the best Grendel stories.
I can remember that. I might actually get on eBay and find that today.
Interesting technical thing too. If you can find the original first printing by Kamiko, I think that's the best.
Okay.
Because what Matt Wagner was doing and he did this with Mage too. I find the original printings of Mage the best too. He was coloring it in a completely different way than anybody colored a comic. He was using an air marker, which is, if you know what an airbrush is, An airbrush is just a tool that it's like a spray can. It's like a very easy to control. It's basically spray paint, but really easy to control. You get an airbrush, which is like this little gun-like thing, and you put paint in this little bucket, and now you can control how fast the paint sprays out, how much and how fast the paint sprays out. So that's what an airbrush is. He was using an air marker. What an air marker is it takes just a regular marker, like let's look at just a regular marker like this. We need a chisel tip. Regular marker like that. And it's got a little air nozzle with a can of hooked up to a can of compressed air. And it's the same thing as an airbrush, only cruder, where the air nozzle blows against the tip of the airbrush and sprays the ink. So it's like kind of like a cheapo airbrush, except the one thing about an air marker is it's not nearly as efficient as an airbrush. So you get little specks of because it's basically like blowing really hard on this marker. So it doesn't blow, so the ink doesn't flow as evenly as an airbrush. So you get like,
it's like you put some texture on it.
Yeah, it gets a texture on it in little specks. And I think that really added a unique look to the Grendel, the Devil by the Deed, and the early mages. But what happened was when Kamiko went out of business, they lost all the film for that. So they recolored everything, and they recolored it digitally. So it looks like a normal comic now, rather than that unique coloring that both Grendel and Mage had.
Oh, that's fantastic. I might put some egg on my chin here, but I was telling you about my buddy who liked Grendel. He used to have a YouTube channel. I haven't heard from him in a while. We're talking Grendel and Matt Wagner, and I think he just popped up, Scott X1307. I think that's him. I haven't heard from him in years, and there he is.
Oh, Paolo just told us too. Grendel is essentially a meme, an idea virus. The current miniseries is Grendel transmitting itself to outer space and other civilizations. There's a good description. Grendel became this meme, this infection, and corrupted people. And it's not even like he's a spirit or anything. Like just kind of the idea of Grendel corrupts people.
That's cool. That's cool. Maybe I'll start with the Devil book you were talking about.
Devil by the Deed. That's the one to get. It's the best Grendel. It's just it's amazing. What's amazing about it too is, like I said, Grendel is he kind of, the Beowulf.
Yeah,
is where the name Grendel comes from.
Yeah.
Was Grendel the monster in Beowulf? Yeah, Beowulf was the hero and Grendel was the monster.
Yeah.
And what he did in Devil by the Deed is he switched the roles in terms of Grendel's the monster, but he looks like a hero. He's Hunter Rose, a famous author, but he's also a crime lord. So he's kind of the anti-Batman. He's a famous millionaire author, but at night he's a crime lord.
That came through in the Batman books that I had with the crossover with Grendel. They had
the hero of the book is named Argent, who's like the Grendel in Beowulf. He's a giant wolf-looking monster. He's a giant wolf. He's a monster. He smells. He's horrible, but everybody, when you look at him, they think he's a monster, but he's the hero of this story.
Yeah. You make me want to check out the Shadow Grendel book that came out a few years ago.
That was good. That was good. I enjoyed that thoroughly too. Because that was all Matt Wagner too. But it's interesting. But like I said, at the to give away the ending of Grendel, it was like this epic battle between these two forces facing off at each other. And in the end, the hero Argent wins. But he loses in that he's still a monster and he gets paralyzed from the battle. And Grendel, the Hunter Rose, actually dies at the end of the battle, but he kind of lives on in this meme of Grendel. So even though the hero won, he really lost. And even though the villain lost, he really won. So it's a real interesting take on, and it's just so well done. because you find yourself like rooting for Hunter Rose, the Grendel, the villain, because he's the handsome, charming, competent one who can get. He's the one you want to be, not the monstrous hero who everybody looks down on.
Yeah, the last time I felt that way was when I watched Three from Hell and The Devil's Rejects. I'm like, these are serial killers. What are you doing? You know? I get that feeling when you start cheering for the wrong guy. Like, oh my God, wait, what am I doing? You catch yourself. All right. See, I got about 30 more minutes here.
All right. Well, let's see what else we got. We've only gotten up to G, Grimjack.
Yeah,
I was a big Grimjack fan.
Is that a Tim Truman book, or is that a John Ostrander book?
What was that?
Who did Grimjack? Was it John Ostrander?
Yeah, with Tim Truman at first.
Yeah, they actually, Tim Truman told me to watch the news a few years ago. I think this was like going to be a movie or a television show.
1 second, I'm going to my closet.
Oh yeah, and now I have one issue of Grimjack because the backup feature has Fred Hembeck in it, which amazed me. So I don't know a lot about Grimjack, but this is definitely a book that has a cult following. I don't know how strong it is nowadays, but 80s and 90s, I met quite a few people who were like, it was the same crowd that knew who Judge Dredd was, if I remember right. Judge Dredd, John Sable, they were into that kind of stuff.
Just to show you how big a Grimjack fan I was, back in my freshman or sophomore year of college, I painted myself a Grimjacket.
Oh, hold on. Don't move. Don't move. Let me figure this out. We're putting you up there. All right.
Oh, there we go. This is I painted this is issue 1, the Tim Truman of Grimjack. I wore this a lot all through college, my Grimjacket. So
well, I don't want anything to happen to you, and I don't know if you have a will, but that if something happens to you, that's got to make its way to me. You know, it'll be framed and well preserved.
Let's see if it's.
I did the same thing to my denim jacket, but it was a monster I made up on the back of it. You know, even the badges. I had paper clips, safety pins, and badges on mine too.
It's a little small because I probably made this when I was 165 pounds. Then I worked out through college to get up to about 185 pounds, which is what I am now. A few years ago, I had to work out to get back down to 185 pounds. So this is made for like 165 pound skinny 18-year-old Jared. So it doesn't quite.
You need to do a whole video with a handheld camera just on that jacket.
I think I'm going to have to, just because it's got all these buttons.
Mine was full of Batman and Joker buttons that came out during the Tim Burton movie. I took markers and put a monster that I had made, kind of like what you did there, but mine was with like fabric markers. And then I had safety pins and paper clips because I was using what I had. And then I went to Johnson City to watch Bullet Boys, Winger, and Cinderella on the Long Cold Winter tour. You took me back, man. And I remember seeing a girl that used to go to my high school in Johnson City, and I got a lot of attention over my jackets. The whole point is what I'm getting at.
Well, there's a Bill Sienkiewicz Electra pin. Whoops. But I just noticed, I forgot about. I probably did this when I was 20 or so, a little bit later. I put a Latin saying on the back, which I think, if you look right there, it says ultra vires ultra lictum. If I remember correctly, is like transcend authority beyond what is allowable.
I don't think people realize in the 80s we came up with a lot of cool stuff by reading old lore and Dungeons and Dragons leading us down paths. You know, I read some Celtic stuff.
I've got a nudie Betty Boop pin on here somewhere. I'm going to do a video on this. That's naked Betty Boop.
Yeah.
Well, a few other Betty Boop pins. A Nintendo Power pin. I got to put this away. I'll just get drawn into it.
I've been there. I can't wait for the video on that one, man. All right, Paulo. Breen has woke up. Eric Breen is here. Good to see you, man. Paulo, there was a time when Grimjack had a backup strip called Mundane's Bar, and they had art from other creators.
Oh yeah, Mundane's Bar. Mundane's Bar was at the nexus of all realities.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna find that Grimjack issue because, believe it or not, Fred Hembeck would actually. It wasn't so much we were having normal conversations on Facebook, but he was real accessible. And I put up that comic when I found it, and he talked about it a little bit. He said it was a lot of fun.
Grimjack had one of the best like endings to a story I've seen, where I had stopped buying Grimjack when Timothy Truman left it, which was in the teens. But the original story kind of went on to issue 25. And I was like, you know what? I want to buy issue 25 just to see the end of the story. And there's lots of little stories going on at the time. But one of the things was Grimjack, like he took place in this city called Cynosure, which was at the nexus of all realities, so that all these different worlds could come on. And
you know what's cool about this? I know how people hear me now when I talk about comics. This is awesome.
So, like Grimjack, Grimjack was supposed to be in his early 40s. He had lost a step. He wasn't quite as the fighter he was, but he makes up for it in terms of smarts now. He tries to. And there's always stuff going on about, oh my God, I would have, if I was 25, I would have taken this guy out in a second. And so he was, I think there was like gladiatorial games on this particular instance.
That's how I talk now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's like gladiatorial games going on. And at one point, he was one of these gladiators before he rebelled and got out or something. And there was another guy there, who I think his name was Dancer, who was like the one gladiator that could kick Grimjack's ass. He was like the one guy. He was his frenemy, but he was like the one guy that Grimjack couldn't beat. So now this is 20 years later. They're both out. Grimjack is like a PI in this. He's for hire. He does stuff, but he's a good guy. And Dancer has come to become a crime lord. And Grimjack is kind of always kind of in his orbit every time he's investigating. And so the story finally culminates in issue 25 with a face-off between Grimjack and Dancer, the one guy who Grimjack was never able to defeat. And Grimjack kind of beats him easily. And he's like, you never practiced. He's like, and he was shocked. He was like, because Grimjack had been on the street fighting all these years, but Dancer, since he became a crime lord, never had to do anything physical anymore. So Grimjack like beat him easily in a physical confrontation. He's like, you haven't practiced in 10 years. So I just liked that ending of like this guy who was such a force in Grimjack's mind all these years. He was afraid of running into him because he's the one guy he couldn't beat, and he kicked his ass with ease.
Okay, again, I'm gonna have to read this because, like, and I'm not being egotistical here, but you're like describing me, how I look at things. I have it. That's why I love YouTube. I've got it documented in some videos years ago where, like, I will sit at the end of the river on a picnic and watch the bodies of my enemies float by. Well, I'm gonna laugh if like I'm Grimjack. I thought I was Starman, but
Grimjack.
Oh man. Okay, let me see if I can get this screen back up.
Let's see what's next.
Okay. Now Eric Breen and everybody's getting excited. We're going to skip ahead just a little bit. But Giffen's Justice League. There's one or two books here I want to talk about for real. But the Justice League by Giffen and DeMantis. I never realized how big of a seller this was for DC for a while. I looked up. I was there from day one. I was a big fan of Giffen's Legion and Ambush Bug stuff. And I was there for the entire 5 years of their run, buying anything and everything. I've still got the box over there, but they're also in the same comic book bags I bought in 1989 to start bagging them up. And I actually got to talk to Keith Giffen a couple years ago. There's a picture of me and him together on Facebook. And every Justice League book I got to ask him about, he told me I picked the three that he and DeMantis had talked many times, saying that was the epitome of what their Justice League was. So it was really cool to talk to him about it. And when I walked up to Giffen and I told him I had my books, and as soon as I got to the table, I went, "You caused me a lot of troubles." And he didn't seem surprised. And I told him about it. I didn't realize how much of his stuff I had, trying to find something for him to sign. But this book was magic.
I think I bought some of the. I was buying Justice. Like I said, I wasn't buying much Marvel and DC stuff, but I ended up getting those Justice Leagues I don't remember them as fondly as a lot of people do, but I remember, like, if you were younger than me, like I know some people who are 5-6 years younger than me, and that was just the most magic book when they were 14 or 15.
Oh, it was fantastic. This is in the middle of all the grim and gritty and darkness and the
Right,
warlock going on, and then all of a sudden, I wanted more superhero action, but we got that about 3 years later with Despair.
I remember being annoyed that what's his name, McGuire, couldn't keep up the monthly schedule. That was the most annoying thing to me, was the fill-in issues they had.
Well, I got to talk to him because when he signed my #1, he went, I'm bound to have signed every issue ever printed of this. So I don't know how he feels about that first cover being so iconic.
That's how Howard Chaykin feels about Star Wars #1.
Yeah, I read the interview he did. I know about his feelings toward that Star Wars #1. He hates being known as the Star Wars guy. You know. All right. Now here's something I didn't quite notice. We talked about the Batman story up there. I didn't realize McFarlane was already at Marvel at this point. I thought he came in '88.
What's he doing?
This Hulk here, this Peter David Hulk. That's a
McFarlane. He's already done. I don't see. Where's Hulk?
Yeah, Todd McFarlane.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, he was already there.
So he had a Batman book at DC coming out the same month as this Incredible Hulk. That's just the newsstand for you. I don't remember this being on the rack at the same time, but back then you could go through the spinner rack and find comics 2, 3, 4, 5 months old. I bought Crisis on Infinite Earths #4 when #11 was out. You know, so there you go. That's interesting.
Yeah, I remember noticing his Hulk. I had stopped buying the Hulk by that time, but I certainly remember noticing those covers.
Yeah. Like I said, I knew who he was from a few things that he did at DC, but yeah, I remember him being later in the year at DC. This just goes to show you that's the magic of the spinner rack. You know, back then.
He only popped up on my radar with these Hulks. I didn't see any of his DC stuff.
Oh, his Hulk stuff.
I remember not having any interest in Batman Year 2, and we just saw that he drew that. So I probably never even looked at it.
Well, I'm going to geek out a little bit, but this is the first time I saw him inking his own work on these Hulk books. And he had a more raw and very thin ink line that I think suited his stuff the best. There was a book that came out after his big Wolverine issue where he was with, I can't believe I'm going blank on this. It was a dude from some Daredevil books in the 70s, I think, but he was like a bull man. And Hulk looked at him and fought him a little bit. Man Bull, maybe. Yeah. That's actually my favorite issue that McFarlane and Peter David did, because that would rip your heart out. Just Hulk looking at a monster that's pitiful, and that could have been him. I thought that was like fantastic. But I like McFarlane's inking style around this time, and it soon went away. You know,
right?
You know, just art wise, it just blew my mind. But Johnny Quest here with a Sinkovich cover. I have almost all these Kamiko. I'm a big Johnny Quest kid. I watched that in Battle of Planets. So I started scarfing up these Kamiko books in the early 2000s when I finally found them. I didn't know they existed.
By the way, Man Bull is going to go on my supervillain team with Bulldozer, Ramrod, the Rhino, and Hammerhead.
You going to call them the Wrecking Crew?
Nope, they're going to be called the Headbangers, because every one of their superpowers is they bash you with their head.
Yeah.
I always wanted to do. I'm like, who has a superpower where they can bash you with their head? Well, 5 Marvel villains do.
Did you throw in the Juggernaut?
Well, the Juggernaut doesn't really bash you with his head. That's not his specific power. He's unstoppable. I mean, he could join the team if we need a star, but
I'd have a scene where they were asking him to join, and the Juggernaut's just looking at him like, "Are you kidding me?"
And I think there was actually 2. What was it? There were 2 Hammerheads. There were I forget who the first one was, but the second one was the guy from Spider-Man with the hammer head.
Yeah, the Al Capone dude who thought he was a big gangster. Yeah,
right. There was also another Hammerhead. I can't remember who the other one was, but I just discovered the second Hammerhead recently. That's why I can't remember who he is. But yeah, I love those Johnny Quests, by the way.
Oh yeah,
I was doing that off the rack.
That's cool. Yeah, the Mr. Loaves came on here, and I couldn't believe in this guy. started doing Wonder Woman and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That when I started getting these books, I was like, this is the same dude that did the Max. That's what I was thinking. And the
Ah,
Johnny Quest books are pretty good. About the first year, they had a David Stevens cover, and they had a bunch of good artists come on here and show a lot of love for Johnny Quest. But this blows my mind because I have the Venture Brothers season 1, I think. And I got to talk to Sinkovich about how he ended up doing the Venture Brothers. The Venture Brothers was inspired by Johnny Quest. So I think it's kind of cool that I have the Venture Brothers and a Johnny Quest cover, just, for my sake there. What else do you see here?
man, there's just
Didn't you
we're
talk
only
about Keene?
yeah. I mentioned Katie Keene. I was like, there's a Katie Keene comic in 1987. I just didn't even realize that. To me, I think Katie Keene. I think of like the 50s.
Yeah.
I don't even realize it was Archie. There's Justice Machine. That was Justice Machine was my first, my very first indie comic I got. Justice Machine #1 in 1984, which was magazine size. Matter of fact, I think Sleepy Reader just showed off that issue of Justice Machine in one of his latest hauls.
Okay.
That was one of the later ones, but originally it was by Noble Comics. It was, and what was a good gimmick it had in '84 was like the first cover was by Byrne. Then it's like Mike Kostovich, I think, was the creator and artist on Justice Machine. And the second one was he was like inked by Terry Austin, the cover. And the third one had like some other big name artist do the inks or pencils. So I was like, oh, that's cool on an indie book. But yeah, I was that was when my comic shop just opened. A couple of years into it, or maybe even 80. I'm about to look up when Justice Machine #1.
I have to go back and see what issues I have. Justice Machine. I have a beat up annual. That's the first appearance of the Elementals.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I have a few issues of maybe miniseries where Elementals kind of popped up or teamed up with them. But I just saw it's by Tony Isabella, so I'm out.
You're not a Tony Isabella fan?
Oh no.
I can't remember. I know his name. I can't think of anything he's written.
Black Lightning, and then he did some stuff at Marvel in the 70s, but he's gone off the rocker.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we were talking about the Archie comics. The actual comics were in grocery stores, and then you mentioned the digest; they were there too. I don't know.
Actual comics in grocery stores.
I remember Archie Comics came out with a Shield book there for a little bit that came out, and I think it was some reprinted Jack Kirby work. That's the only Archie Comics. That, and they did Archie got a hold of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and did a comic more based on the cartoon series. Everything else was at grocery stores and these digests and stuff. Now, this is a great era for Legion of Superheroes. That's a John Byrne cover, but I think, was it Steve Lytle doing the Greg LaRocque and Steve Lytle and all these guys coming onto this Baxter series? I was, of course, getting Tales of the Legion of Superheroes that reprinted these, and they had great covers too. But this is a really fun time for the Legion. Let's see. Love and Rockets. I'd heard about Love and Rockets. I'll never forget that advertisements they had for Love and Rockets where everybody was it looked like the usual suspects. They were looked like they were all in a lineup.
Love and Rockets was another one I jumped on fairly late. It was probably right around this time. I'd actually read some of the like when they reprinted some of the early stuff in Mechanics, as they reprinted it as a mini series, comic book size, called Mechanics. I remember reading that, and then it wasn't until right around this time that when I was in art school and I had a friend. And she was really into Love and Rockets. She just loved Love. She was one of these punk rock girls who didn't read comics but loved Love and Rockets because it was about punk rock girls. And I was like, you know what? I'm just putting Love and Rockets on my pull list. And I just put it on my pull list probably right around now, 1987. May have been issue 20 or 21. And it's just been on my pull list ever since.
Yeah, I'm no way a Love and Rockets aficionado. It's like if a issue came across, I got to read it, and I'm like, it's pretty good. I didn't realize it had, that fan base to it. You know what I mean? I was like, that was a pretty good book. I'm also the guy that Nirvana first came on TV. I went, he screams and whispers. That's pretty good. I didn't know.
Love and Rockets was one of those books. I don't know if it's still that way because it's been around so long, but it was one of those books that had a lot of non-comic book fans.
Yeah.
Mostly, punk rock kids, because that's who it was about.
Yeah.
But I think they abandoned it all when it stopped being about punk rock kids.
I still remember. I mean, the 90s is when I really noticed the fan base for that. I was getting out in the world stuff, right? I mean, I was in St. Louis on break from a little military thing and stuff, and that's the first time I actually saw real punks as much as you can get away from the 70s and stuff. And they had, one of them had a stack of 11 rockets. And I was like, I went up and talked to him. I didn't give a shit, but I walked up. Started talking comics, man, and he was cool about it. What we got here? Fafner 27. I almost picked up the Muppet Babies omnibus last year. I was tempted. This just shows you we can go anywhere with this, but that Muppet Babies cartoon had a rabid fan following. Grown-ups were watching this. To me, this was like Pee-wee's Playhouse before Pee-wee's Playhouse. People loved that cartoon. So I say get the omnibus. I mean, you'd be amazed what fans they had.
I'm just noticing too, the Marvel Tales cover was a reprint of the Marvel Team Up Captain Britain one. And I've always wanted to go back and once again digitally collect a lot. Those later Marvel Tales stuff have some really nice covers. A lot of them by McFarlane and other big name artists of the early 90s, but no one ever sees them because no one was collecting Marvel Tales.
Yeah, let me talk to Gore Vidal here for a minute, because I think I left a comment on one of his things that goes with Love and Rockets. But anyway, Gore Vidal said Justice League of America 28 had a funny story where Guy Gardner takes Ice out on a date. He takes her to go see a porn film. She punches him, and it's a reference to Taxi Driver. And that was I got to talk a little bit about that with Giffen. That was hilarious. And then he said Love and Rockets was enchanting. It was either Earl Grey or Gore Vidal that I left a comment on. Maybe one of their videos. They're talking about Love and Rockets. I met the Hernandez brothers a couple years ago, and it amazed me how normal they were. And I don't mean that. I'm not saying that I didn't expect them to be freaks. That's not what I'm saying. But they had their wives there, and their wives had these fun little dresses like from the 50s with like old school sci-fi rockets on them. I mean, they were really cool. And they were staying in the same hotel as me and my buddy was, and I saw them in the bar, and I didn't go up and bother them. They were real approachable, but they had their crew in the corner, and I felt like I was in the suburbs having drinks at a barbecue if I went over there. It just surprised me how normal they were,
I just recently this winter read Luba, the Gilbert Hernandez, all the collections of Luba, which is 500 pages. I've read them all over the years in the issues, but to sit down and read them from beginning to end was amazing.
Nice. Now, these Marvel Tales you were talking about, I'm just checking the date here. I bought these two books the same day, Marvel Saga and the Marvel Tales. And to me, this is some of John Byrne's best work. It blew me away that it was from the 70s as I was figuring out.
I bought that the first time around. I bought it in Marvel Team Up when it came out.
And you're right, man. I'll get the McFarlane covers when I come across them later on. But Marvel Tales, the deep secret here is that even the story that reprints Gwen Stacy's death and stuff is worth a little bit. The Punisher 120, Spider-Man 129 they reprinted, it's worth a little bit. And then as you got up into like the late 80s and 90s, what you're talking about, they had McFarlane come on, do a bunch of covers for them and stuff. Well worth the money.
And I always say, I wonder if there's anyone alive who's got a complete collection of Marvel Tales.
Yeah, Marvel Tales, Marvel 2 and 1.
Well, Marvel 2 and 1 I could see. Like Marvel Tales is all reprints. I bet there's more people with a complete collection of Amazing Spider-Man from 1 to whatever than there is a complete collection of Marvel Tales, because they're reprints.
Yeah. So back in the early days of this community and stuff, it was blowing my mind how many people were working on their Marvel 2 and 1, and 2 or 3 people popped up that were getting the Marvel Tales. I mean,
I've talked to people and they're like, well, I used to have 1 to 125 of Marvel Tales. I used to have these issues of Marvel Tales. Everybody either used to have a lot of Marvel Tales, but I've never heard anyone say, I have it went up to like 250 or something. It's like,
I'm also the guy when I find out somebody's got a complete set of Booster Gold from the 80s. So I'm not the guy to ask. Like, what's wrong with you?
I don't think anybody has got a complete set of Marvel Tales, because why would you?
Cheap comics, cheap reprints. You don't want to go back and, I mean, there's a lot of people who were trying to get a complete set of Amazing Spider-Man back then. And me and Constant Bromstar Constant Bromstar and I would tell people, just get the first 200 or maybe the 300, then try to get that.
But it's so easy now to get those reprints in trade form or hardcover. So it's like, who's going to go back and get them in Marvel Tales?
I'm trying to think. There's something that I've been just going ahead and getting. Oh, I've been getting things off eBay for $1, where it's like these books that came out in the early 80s where they reprinted Jim Starlin's Shield. I got 2 of those, and I just ordered the Skrull Scree War. Yeah. 2 issues reprinted, 2 complete issues with wraparound covers from the early 80s for 99 cents. So they're out there.
Those are nice.
Yeah. So we got some people who are, talking about having Marvel Tales, defending it.
Well, everybody's got some issues of Marvel Tales. But I mean, nobody has a complete collection of Marvel Tales, because it's not one of those books you track down a complete collection of.
Mm-hmm.
Just nobody does.
It's funny. Mr. Monster. I'm looking at Mr. Monster. I was curious about him. He was another one of those guys that I couldn't figure out how he had a following, and I thought it was just an indie book thing. But
Michael T. Gilbert. Yeah. I bought some Mr. Monster, but I was never a huge fan of it. The stories were just a little too wacky for me. They were just Ms. Tree. I bought a lot of Ms. Tree.
For some reason, it seems like I remember Mr. Monster from Dark Horse Presents. I'm going to have to.
Yes, he was in some recent issues of Dark Horse Presents, Volume 2 or Volume 3.
Yeah. Here's where New Mutants had lost its way. Going back to the Art Adams costumes from an X-Men annual.
I gave up on New Mutants long before that.
Yeah, here's the Eric Larson issue of Teen Titans. This is where I found him. And when he took over Doom Patrol.
I don't think I ever saw Larson until he was at Marvel.
Yeah. He took over Doom Patrol, and I was like, what is this crap? I'm not going to lie. I was like, what are they doing?
New Wave versus the Volunteers in 3D.
Where are you at?
Even I didn't get that book.
Where's it at?
It's right next to the new Teen Titans. New Wave versus the Volunteers in 3D from Eclipse. Talk about a book no one knows exists.
I'm pretty sure there's a reason not to be that guy.
Who is New Wave? Who are the Volunteers? I'm an indie guy. I was buying plenty of Eclipse comics, and I don't even know this one.
Yeah. Well, look what it has on there. Dead End. Come on, man. Dead End. That's not great promotion. I don't even know. I think I've heard of New Wave, but I don't know who the Volunteers are.
I may have heard of New Wave. I've never heard of the Volunteers. I know that. Or is it Next Wave I'm thinking of? I don't even know.
Oh my God. I had this Outsiders special. And I think there's and it connects with, I think, an Infinity Incorporated special. It was pretty rough. It was pretty rough reading. I've just kept it. Covers.
I bought like the first 1 or 2 or 3 issues of Batman and the Outsiders, and that was it. I was done.
Oh, I was in there till issue like 31 or 32, man. I was in there, and it bothered me when Alan Davis came on, because I couldn't figure out why you had this great, bright artist on a dark character. I was like, his style would be better suited elsewhere. Little did I know,
the pre-internet days of the official index to Marvel Team Up and the official index to the X-Men.
Yeah. I'm trying to get the second issue of the official index to Crisis on Infinite Earths,
Oh, I didn't know there was one of them.
And they had an official index to the Teen Titans. Yeah. Yeah. It amazed me. And I don't think this says Marvel, but Marvel did their own index. There was another company that did indexes to the Legion, the Teen Titans, and it wasn't DC or Marvel. I don't remember who the company was.
There's another Eclipse book, Overload #1, that I've never seen before. Some cartoony stuff. That Eclipse must have been really on the decline by now, because I don't even recognize any of this stuff. And I bought a lot of Eclipse comics.
Well, it doesn't give us any, it doesn't really seem to give
Any
us
credit.
credits, but this looks like Sam Keith right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arthur pseudonym or Sam Keith.
That turtle looks vaguely familiar.
Yeah.
But who knows? Just
And
could
this
be the style.
right here on this hamster, isn't that I recognize this art style, and I cannot think of the guy's name.
Is that one of the radioactive black belt adolescent hamster guys? No. Maybe it is. Yeah, it is.
I think it is, but I'm trying to figure out the art style here. I recognize.
Yeah, I don't remember who did that book, but I remember in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle wave of copycats, there was the radioactive adolescent black belt hamsters, and that's, I think, is one of them.
They're geriatric. That is one of them, because I was sitting here trying to think what the other team was, and it was the geriatric hamsters that came out too. Huh. Oh man, let me see what we got here. The Punisher, that's an iconic cover there. They redid that. I had that. Robotech Masters, I have quite a few of those. And
Scout. I bought like the first couple of issues of that, and not much.
Nah, but Scout's a very underrated book. Oh my gosh.
Porta Prince and the Glamazons, another one from Eclipse I've never heard of, and this is issue number 3.
I hope you're
Portia Prince and the Glamazons. What the hell? Man, Eclipse was putting out books I've never even heard of in this time.
These things probably had print runs of just a couple thousand, I would guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Maybe there's some gems in there. I'm going to laugh when you go through your shelves and oh, crap. Hold on, I lost it. I hit the wrong button.
Uh-huh. Oh, an issue of Scout. I'm a big Scout fan. There's some Tim Truman stuff. Have you ever read Scout?
Yeah, I've actually talked to Tim Truman about it. I got the first 5 or 6 signed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was another one when my comic shop first opened that I was missing like 2 issues from, so I immediately went and got them for like $2 a piece. That's when my comic shop first opened. That was the first place that had a lot of these 80s indie stuff that I was missing like 2 issues of and could never find. And I was like, I just ordered all of them. Like issues of Dalgota I was missing. Eric Breen tells us Richard Howell did the art on Portia Prince. Okay. There's a name I've heard. Oh, Richie Rich was still around.
Mm-hmm.
The number of Richie Rich books in the 70s is astounding. They were selling like 5 million Richie Rich books a month between all the different titles.
Oh, every comic book show I go, somebody's got a short box, long box of Casper Richie Rich, and I'll pick up the spooky books every now and then. If you remember him, he was like a Casper with a turban, a big nose, some freckles, and a cigar. Huh. Richie Rich also had his cartoon in the early 80s that cracked me up. Now, these Secret Origin books, loved them. Love them. I still have them. I'm still trying to get a complete set. These were just awesome. These were books that I would just turn around and, get my.
I wasn't a huge fan. I think I made some. I used some of those to make some sketch covers out of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're cheap, and all they do is just give you the knowledge, let you know where these characters came from. Roy Thomas would change a few things here and there, but nothing drastic. And for some reason, the Shazam book, I've always been a huge Captain Marvel fan because of the show in the 70s that came on Saturday mornings. But Roy Thomas on Captain Marvel never feels right, and he acts like he's the expert on him.
I used to see the Tales of Bean World there. I used to enjoy that one.
Well, I've only read. Yeah. Well, you know what? I keep interrupting you. Let me jump over here. If I see you, I won't interrupt you. Yeah.
It's done by Larry Motter, the guy who went on to be like the publisher of Image Comics.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I actually like it because it reminds me of being a kid. I don't know. Have you ever read Tales of Bean World?
The only time I've run across was in that Total Eclipse crossover I was telling you about. Bean was right there running his mouth, whatever his name
is. There's these little bean characters that run around, and he makes his whole world for them. But when I was a kid, 10 or 12 years old, I had my older cousin, who was about 4 years older than me. And he died young, too, when he was 20 in a motorcycle accident. But he used to draw what he called the potato people. And they were kind of like the beans. He would get a piece of loose leaf paper, and he'd draw these potato people with arms, potatoes with arms and legs. And on the loose leaf paper would all be different levels. We'd have them like bringing wheelbarrows of stuff up to this level and doing stuff in this level. And I wish I had some of those, but Bean World always reminded me of that. So I have sort of a special place in my heart for Tales of Bean World because of my older cousin Bobby.
We got some love for Scout out here that did future with the Apaches and stuff, man. I keep meaning to go back to rereading those.
Good stuff.
Somebody
Eric
said
read D&A Agents.
Yeah, Scott X has a full run, and somebody's telling him he picked up the full run of Scout because of him.
D&A Agents had a secret crossover with the Teen Titans too.
I got a video from like 2012 where I showed that. I have that.
Yes. The Recombatants, was that what they're the?
Yeah. Steve Rude did the Teen Titans issue. Yeah. The secret crossover. I think I have a video called Secret Crossovers, and I got it in there. Let me see. The Spectre book, Star Blazers, Starbrand, Strike Force story.
Starbrand is the post Jim Shooter and JR Jr. one, so it wasn't any good after that. But the Jim Shooter and JR Jr. issues of Starbrand, I recommend. Well, that's when they blew up Pittsburgh just to get back at Jim Shooter because that was his hometown.
I didn't know they did it for that reason, but I liked what they did when John Byrne and it had Tom Palmer inking him. I love Tom Palmer on anybody, but especially on John Byrne at the time. But to me, it felt like John Byrne had really been trying to write. He said he considered himself a writer first and an artist second, which none of us bought back in the day. But I felt like he was hanging around Larry Niven, a real sci-fi writer or something, and it was like he was trying to emulate his writing to be clever. So he went real sci-fi with Starbrand and turned it into a time travel loop. John Byrne hit this thing for years where he lived time travel.
I was gone before John Burns ever got on it, so I don't know what he did.
Yeah, they're cheap. I think they're worth reading. You know, it's 19 of a 19 issue limited series is how. Strike Force Moratori. I keep trying to read those. I remember enjoying those in the 90s when I found a big stack of them. And this will probably never be reprinted because the guy who did this actually made Marvel mad, according to lore, because he actually got to keep a piece of them in a loophole with his contract.
Okay.
That's why it's been reprinted. I think that plays a big part in why it's got a cult following. Yeah. And that's why it'll never be anything, is, the people back then.
We're into the Rick Veitch issues of Swamp Thing, post Alan Moore. Not as good as the Alan Moore stuff, but still pretty solid.
I remember those issues. Catch up with it. Yeah, this Rick Veitch. See, this is right in the middle. Yeah, I think this one's right towards the end of Alan Moore's run. So
I thought he wasn't writing it. This one.
Huh. I'm trying to remember.
Rick Veitch. So he must have just ended.
Well, there was one or two issues that they had fill-in artists, and one had the patchwork pop up, and that might have been Veitch. To me, it's like they were starting to slowly bring Veitch in. Seems like Alan Moore might have had an issue or two after this, and then Veitch took over for quite a while. I hate they never let him. I've got the issue. Rick Veitch is on my Facebook, and he'll give you a nod and a wink every now and then, but he apparently looks at my Facebook every now and then, like with probably everybody else that is on his friends list there. But I posted the picture. I took a picture of one of his issues where Swamp Thing's at the Parliament of Trees, and in the very corner he put Man Thing in it. I said, "How did this Man Thing get in my Swamp Thing?" And he came in with an LOL or something.
Huh. Oh, look at this! I didn't realize this was the Usagi Yojimbo #1 came out. I thought it was 1986. It was 1987. Wow. Look at that. That's the first issue of Usagi Yojimbo I ever bought, and it's been on my pull list ever since.
Cool. Let me catch up with you here in a minute. Suicide Squad, the Superman, I still have all of those from the rack.
Yeah.
That tells me Titans was a good issue. Hold on here. Let me jump.
Well, let's jump back to Shatter for a second. Remember the first digital comic?
Yes. Wait a minute. There it is. Oh, now correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there an Iron Man hardback that came out that was supposed to claim to be the first digital comic? Oh, this is
Oh, I still have that one. It's on
yeah,
my shelf.
yeah. There's
It
an
might not be
Iron
the first
Man. Let me jump back
Iron
over
Man.
here. There's a
Yeah.
Batman and an Iron Man, and then this one's claiming, and it's a Peter B. Gillis. Peter Gillis is one of those underrated writers too.
Batman Digital Justice. I have that on my shelf still. Iron Man, I can't remember the name of it, but I can picture the cover. He's sitting there standing a gun. And Mike Sens may even have had something to do with one of those. They were the first digital ones from Marvel and DC, but I'm pretty sure that Shatter came out before them.
Yeah. Yeah, this is probably 2 years before that. You want to check the comments section there?
Sure.
And I can get my bearings here.
What do we have here? Let's go back in time. Talking about a little DNA agents here. Fender 27, Tom Palmer did the heavy lifting for John Romita Jr. on Kick-Ass. Romita gets the credit, but Palmer is the star for the art on that book, in my opinion. Gore Vidal tells us Scout and anything by Tim Truman won't disappoint. That's true. And yes, anything from the early years of Eclipse, First Pacific, and Kamiko are worth getting. There's so much material, yeah. Those later Eclipses, we don't know. Eric Breen, Eglantine touts Strike Force Moratori as being really good. I've heard that about Strike Force Moratori. I remember reading a little of it, but not a lot.
Oh, man, I talked about Strike Force Moratori so long on my channel back in 2014. A viewer bought my set. He said he wanted something out of a Howler Mouse collection that he put his hands on, and I sold him those. So that's what happened with my first set.
Fenner 27 tells us he feels bad for not reading Saga of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. Well, you should feel bad. And if you were there at the time, it was revolutionary. It's been copied so many times since then that the impact isn't the same, but it was revolutionary at the time. And it's still good, of course. Paolo says there's a TPB with the first 8 issues of Strike Force. I once found Peter B. Gillis in a Facebook group and asked him about a second volume. He said the words porcine aviation, I guess when pigs fly. Gore Vidal, Neil Gaiman in an interview said that Swamp Thing in 1983 brought him back to reading comics and seriously consider writing them. That was how impactful.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you the exact moment that because I had been buying Saga of Swamp Thing and then stopped. And then I had heard, I don't even know where I heard this stuff in 1985. I'd heard that Swamp Thing was really good again. I think Alan Moore came on with issue 20 or 21. And I started buying it. And I started buying it again at issue 23 or 24. And he invented what I now call, and which was the plague of the early 2000s, cool moment writing. I said it was the plague of the early 2000s because no one knew that you write up to this one cool moment and that gives you chills. And Alan Moore was doing that then. Well, like I said, I can still remember the issue. It was when Arcane came back and killed Abby. Yeah. And at the beginning, and he killed Abby at the end of the last issue. In the beginning of the next issue, Swamp Thing he's just devastated, and he's carrying. And Abby is now, and Arcane is now. He's no longer this man. He's this demon thing, and he's got flies around him, and the art is just crazy. And Swamp Thing is just walking back to the swamp, as Arcane is just taunting him with his dead girlfriend, and he's telling him he not only killed Abby. He told her she's now in hell. He condemned her to hell. And I'm getting emotional just remembering this, reading this back then.
To me, that was the first real. To me, that was the first. Yeah.
Walking back to the swamp and Arcane is just this demon taunting him until. And I guess there was this one panel where Swamp Thing is looking back over his shoulder, saying, "You should not have followed me here." And that's where you first see he's not the Swamp Thing anymore. He's this swamp elemental. And just he just tears Arcane apart. and you're just like, whoa, this isn't any Swamp Thing I've ever read before. And that's when I knew Alan Moore was different, and this was all different.
After reading and rereading that series over the years and stuff, and I could change my mind tomorrow on this. The story that you brought up is the one that got me too. Okay, I mean that's the one where I was actually tore up about a comic for the first time, right? That I can remember. But to me, after rereading and reading it, that's when we got our first real Alan Moore story. Everything he had done before that was setting a mood, rebuilding Swamp Thing, building the book up, setting up everything. And then you get the payoff in that story in that annual where he goes to hell to get Abby.
Right.
And it's just freaking beautiful. It's perfect. It's
like
perfect.
That was when I went, wow, that this isn't the same Swamp Thing it was. This is a whole different world of comics right here. This Swamp Thing. And it wasn't even popular for a long while.
No. And when he left the rose in hell, I was like, this guy's even a poet. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, he had like a little bit of class to this horror story where he left a rose that grows for Abby in hell. I was just like, oh my God, just left and right. I can go on with that. Oh man. I want to end up digging them out, and I've got a stack of books here I need to read.
Yeah. Fenner 27, is that where Scott Snyder got his influence for Swamp Thing being part of the Green from Alan Moore? Yeah, Swamp Thing is the one who came up with Swamp Thing being part of the Green and an elemental and not just a person. That's all Alan Moore. And then V built on it all, and the Parliament of the Green. That was all Alan Moore.
Yeah, I'm going to go on record. If you go back and read the Scott Snyder Swamp Thing and stuff, if you go back and read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing and stuff, you're not going to be that impressed with Scott Snyder. You're not. You're not. Yeah. You actually might be, if you love those books. I mean, I think everybody needs to read Alan Moore Swamp Thing, just like they need to read Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's Fantastic Four. It's one of those series.
At least see where it all came from. I mean, Alan Moore's influenced generations of comic writers.
And what I want to throw out there is Len Wein gave Alan Moore his blessing. He's like, go for it. He was editing the book. He helped get him on the book. He said, do whatever you want. So that's the difference between what Alan Moore did with that creation and a lot of other people. Oh, we just needed a whole show on Swamp Thing. Now, not to switch gears, this Silver Surfer book right here. This was the first comic book. It was either this or an X Factor, but this was the first comic book I got in the mail from what we were talking about last week in those, not even an envelope, just a piece of wraparound.
Your first subscription?
Yeah. Yeah. This was it. I still have this book and that whole, I think I got like the first 12. I thought somehow I got like 13 or 14 issues for the price of 12. But the thing about it is I don't even think this was the book I really wanted to subscribe to. It's just what they sent me. So, fantastic, man. Yeah, I'm all pumped up for Swamp Thing again. Anytime I talk about Swamp Thing and Alan Moore,
just thinking about that issue gets me pumped up. It's like I can barely speak straight. I can remember trying to get this was the first Alan Moore I had read. Was those issues, and Alan Moore was just started. Swamp Thing is what kind of made him start to get popular. And I can remember trying to convince my friend Rob, who I'm still friends with, to read. But he's more of a mainstream guy. I'm like, you got to read this Alan Moore guy. You got to read this Alan Moore guy. He's like, when I get around to it, I'm like, no, you've got to read this Alan Moore guy. But that's how it was the same way getting people to read the Byrne Claremont X-Men, I was like, you got to read. It was a cult book at first. You couldn't get mainstream people to read Byrne and Claremont X-Men or Alan Moore and Veitch and Toddlebin's Swamp Thing. You got to read it. You got to read it.
Eric Breen just popped up. Any thoughts on Alan Moore's Miracle Man? Well, I got the poster. Alan Moore's Miracle Man.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. After they got past the first, the first 2-3 issues that they reprinted through Eclipse, if I remember right, didn't really impress me. It was after he started doing the new stuff, probably around issue 4 and 5. By the time I remember he got to issue 10 and 11, I know the very scene that made me a Miracle Man fan is where they had the woman that was going to have his baby, and all of a sudden we get this point of view where you're looking like through the eyes of Miracle Man, right? And all you see in front of him is a tree in his fist, and the tree explodes. The very next panel, and this is like long panels, you see a rock, and the rock explodes. Then you see a henchman with a gun in front of the house, and he explodes. That's when I became a Miracle Man fan. I was like,
Did Marvel ever finish reprinting those?
I'm trying to think. They still haven't put out the issue 25. I think they stopped around 21 or 22. The only thing I'm getting from Marvel in those is I'm getting the hardbacks, but I got the Red King story in single issues. And I got the Grant Morrison, the annual that had the unreleased Grant Morrison story.
I only got the Alan Moore Miracle Mans in the beginning. I think I may not have even gone to the end because it was coming out so infrequently that it was kind of like when I was away in college, I somehow didn't get them.
Well, I'm one of those people that's realistic. I always try to come from the mind of people who read comics. We got to remember that those stories are closer to 40 years old now than they are 30. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And they've been talked about for a long time. They got a little bit of a mystique, and it was one of those books that helped change comics when we finally saw it in America. Right. Okay. So when new readers come in and read it now, that some of the people I either can't figure out if they can't understand what they're reading and it's too smart, or if comics have pushed the limits so far for so long where they're coming in.
What it is.
They don't get it.
It's like Citizen Kane. I always compare a lot of Citizen Kane was a lot of critics' movie is the greatest movie of all time. That's because it invented so many techniques. When people see Citizen Kane now, they've been seeing those techniques for 80 years. So now they're like, what's so great about this movie? They don't have the context to understand that this is where stuff was invented.
I tell you what, I remember a story that Stephen King revealed saying that where he never finished the Dark Tower series, that he actually had a woman call him up, said she had cancer, was going to die. Please tell me how it ends. I'm going to die. I'm going to take it with me. I'm beginning to get to that point with that last issue of Neil Gaiman's Miracle Man, because I'm sitting here talking to you, realizing I've been waiting 30 years for that last issue.
I haven't read anything but the Alan Moore stuff. So
the Neil Gaiman stuff the Neil Gaiman stuff is good, but it's not the Alan Moore stuff. It's a golden age. It's more about Miracle Man's, I'm going by memory, Miracle Man's effect on the world and kind of taking over. And
have you ever read, speaking of Golden Age memory just reminded me, have you ever read Alan Moore's Supreme?
Yeah, I have them all right on the shelf over here.
That's like a love letter to the Silver Age of Superman. That was kind of interesting.
Oh, it's fantastic. And there's an issue where he's got some symbolism that let's put it this way. There's an issue where he finally, I can't remember the girl's name. It's his Lois Lane. They work on the comic book together, the Supreme comic book together. And the girl who's either like his editor or a writer or something, he gets to go over there. Chris Sprouse is a genius with his artwork in this. Yeah. And one of the first thing that happens is he walks in and there's this tension because he's there to hit on her. And he finally, I think it's probably when he told her he was Supreme or something. Anyway, the whole point of the story is that he sits down on the floor and he puts his feet under her table and he's got a glass right there while he's looking at her, positioned perfectly. Real subtle, but very like, this is going to happen. And I'm like, oh, nobody's going to notice that. But I see what you did there, Chris. All right. Let me see what we got here. Now, this
I think I have that issue of women's comics that I just noticed number here. Yeah, I have that. It might be the only issue of women's comics I ever saw.
Where are you on here? I'm seeing Wonder Girl.
Down at W, the very last row.
W-I.
It was just a whole bunch of indie women cartoonists did that stuff. And
nice.
I probably have a few issues of it, but I remember that cover specifically. But like, I'd buy stuff like that when I saw it because it's kind of cool because you don't often see that many indie women's comic stuff. So,
oh man, well, this is blowing my mind here. I didn't realize Watchmen came out the same month because we couldn't get it on the newsstand. The same month that I bought this Web of Spider-Man that I still have with Wolverine.
Oh wow!
James Owsley, who's Christopher Priest. I love his stuff.
Watchmen number 10. There it is.
Yeah, and Watchmen number 10. And that book was so late. I didn't think it ran in. Well, this is April, early '87. So I know it took them forever to get that last issue out. But that's very.
I bought Watchmen off the stands.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it was the next year that I got that trade that I still have in the parking lot where it looked like a drug deal going on.
I still have the Absolute Watchmen that I took out of the library only because all the libraries closed. This is supposed to be due, but since all the libraries closed, I still have it. This is Watchmen the Disgusting Edition because I had to wash the plastic on it. Because it was just so filthy, dirty, horrible to touch.
I'm going to have to do a video of my entire Watchmen collection because I have a ton over there.
I sold my original issues last year or so. Just because I needed the money, and I was like, you know what, I may as well. I hadn't cracked my original issues since 1990. So I'm like, you know what, I may as well sell these to someone who can appreciate them, and I need the money.
All the way up until about 2008, I was finding Watchmen issues for $1 a piece and dollar boxes up here at these antique shops. Right. And I can say this, my friends knew it, but it killed them because my work allowed me to travel. I knew where to find these books. I'd pick up a few here and there. I'd take them back to them and I'd get $10, $12 a piece. That's how. Wow. I'm serious when I say for like 2 decades I didn't touch my paycheck, But now I popped this Wonder Woman up, and I know I was a big Byrne fan and all this stuff like that, but I absolutely loved the first year of this Perez Len Wein.
Oh, it's the Perez issues. I never read any of them.
I don't think any Wonder Woman has touched. To me, this is the perfect Wonder Woman, what they did here. And Perez was top notch. Phoebus and Phobos, the covers before this one are fantastic covers. I almost want to look them up. But the first year of this book is outstanding. Outstanding. Yeah, this whole run was pretty good, but these first year of these books, maybe all the way up until issue 16 or 17, are just inspired. I mean, they're fantastic.
I always people usually point to these ones when I point out that Wonder Woman has been more important as a cultural icon than as a comic book. Because there's almost no good Wonder Woman runs. People like the Perez run and they like the Byrne run, and even those are not their favorite Perez and Byrne stuff.
Nah. To me, the perfect run is that first 12 issues, at least, of those. Even I can even probably knock it down to the first 3 issues are perfect. That's a great run. And then the Byrne issues, like I said, I have most of the Byrne issues and stuff, and I don't think he ever really clicked on it. It's kind of like if there's ever a series I feel like Byrne, I don't know if he did or not, called it in. It was that one. He did, and he ended it with another time travel story so he could change time to have a Wonder Woman during World War II. And I was like, what are you doing? Another time travel story? He killed her and made her a goddess, but I'm like, she'll be back,
I noticed an issue of Whisper there too. That was another one I collected. Once again, in the early 2000s, I was missing like an issue or 2 of it. So I went to mycomicshop.com, opened it, and I got the couple of issues. And she was like a ninja. And then I tried to read, this is like 10 years, 15 years ago. I tried to reread them and only made it through a couple issues before I went, I can't take this. So but I still have all the issues. I'm like, I'm going to try to read it again. But for some reason, I could not make it through them. And they did not hold up for me as I tried to read them 25 years later.
I think I have 2 or 3 issues in a box somewhere that I've never read, but Norm Brayfogle did the art on these.
Who was it? Stephen Grant was the writer?
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I bought them all when they came out and liked them. I don't know why I couldn't get through them, a bunch of years later when I tried. But I'll have to give it another try one of these days because I enjoyed it, I remember.
Cool. Hey, I'm losing my voice here. Let me get a little refill here. You want to do some comments real quick? I can hear you.
Sure. Let's see. Let's see who's in the comments section. Gore Vidal had only 2 subscriptions, Moon Knight and the Micronauts. I used to get subscriptions for my birthday and Christmas. So I had subscriptions to my favorite Marvel comics, and then I could explore the newsstand for some of the outlying ones. Miracle Man is brilliant, Gore Vidal says. The last few issues are like reading a Greek tragedy. I'll have to check those out. Is there there's not a full collection of Miracle Man, right?
No, not yet.
The final battle that takes place in London is incredible.
Yeah. I think they're up to if there was 24 issues of Miracle Man, and people can correct me, I'm doing it off the top of my head. Marvel has just collected the first arc of Neil Gaiman's story and they quit. And we're going back 2 or 3 years, if I think, where they stopped. That's why I don't. Yeah. I never kept up with individual issues, but I'd pick up one if I saw it in a dollar box or something. I'm holding out for the hardbacks.
Yeah. Fenner 27 says, Jared, didn't Crumb's wife do some of the work in women's comics? I think so. Aileen Crumb now, because like I said, if you were a woman cartoonist in the 80s, you probably did some work in there. So I think I remember her doing them.
Did you watch the Crumb documentary that Twiggy did back in the 90s?
Oh, yeah. That was good.
Yeah.
I still had that. I'm going to rewatch it.
I still have the 2 VHS tapes. Every time I hear Crumb, I keep meaning to see if there's a DVD.
Rob Ripa says, what's up, Tim and Jared? These shows y'all are doing are awesome. Glad you like them. I'm having fun doing them. Paolo tells us there are full collections of Miracle Man, but not in English. Of course, someone else has the licensing right to it outside. Paolo also says, I have a very large hardcover with all of Alan Moore's stories and another one with the Gaiman stories, but they're in Portuguese. All right. And Gilbert says, trades are out of print and are expensive. Yeah. But Marvel was supposed to be putting all of this stuff back in print. That's what they said when they bought up the rights to Miracle Man, but they didn't.
I've been trying to move further and further away of being negative about today's comics and stuff, because I'm just telling you it's a difference. And that was just one more thing that I told people they were going to screw up from day one. And I called it. It's documented in a video somewhere. I've talked to my friends. I'm like, they're going to screw it up. I was like, I'll get the trades, but I'm not following what they do. And, it wasn't about trying to be right or acting like I had a crystal ball. I just knew it,
John Jones just said, I've been reading Metropolitan. Shame Spider Jerusalem ain't real. It's funny. I just mixed up Metropolitan with the Invisibles in my mind, because Metropolitan I read a couple issues of way back when, but wasn't fond of it. Maybe I'll reread it someday. But I thought but it wasn't that. It was The Invisibles by
Grant Morrison.
Grant Morrison. Now, my friend Bunch once told me if he ever catches me reading The Invisibles, he's going to punch me. So I was like, all right. Not that I'm a big Grant Morrison fan, but he just said that to me one day because he hates The Invisibles.
I almost had a complete set of the comics. I got them in a box over to get rid of them, but I have them all in trade. I'm stuck on volume 5, and I think there's only 7 volumes. I can't get through volume 5, so don't worry about it.
Marvel also said Gaiman was going to write the end of the story, but he never did.
They supposedly have it. I don't know. What happened.
Albert Bailey says, did you hear DC Comics is shipping new product at the end of April? Yeah, I heard that. DC has got a couple of new distributors, and they're going to be shipping their stuff. Freedom Fighters was very good in all their minis. Yeah. DC will be shipping comics in May. That's what they announced, and I looked at the list and went, man, I may have to buy. Too bad I'm not interested in any of these. I may have to buy some just to buy new comics.
The only thing that I'm ordering, and I'm gonna go ahead and do it, is the 3 Jokers, just because I'm curious where they're going with that.
I hate the Joker. I absolutely have read all the Joker stories I'm ever going to read. I don't ever want to read another Joker story. I think he's an annoying character. I still don't know what the Joker's skill set is. I don't know why he exists. Well, besides he's popular. It's like what the Joker. That's why I always say there's 2 Batmans. There's the Batman in the Justice League, who's a super genius, who can take out an entire race of Martian superpowered Superman, and then there's the Batman in a solo comic who's not smart enough to figure out how to defeat the Joker, who has no skill set.
Well,
what is the Joker's skill set?
I've had this conversation before with people, and I like to play around with the idea that I feel like somebody's going to come up with the idea, like I have, that there's a story there. Why does Batman get stupid when he's around? I'm just saying. But my thing with the three Jokers coming out, to me, Jeff Johns is a man who doesn't have to emulate anybody else. He's Jeff Johns, and he's just been on this weird Alan Moore kick since Blackest Night. And the way that they're going to be writing the three Jokers in an interview that he said this was, you're going to feel like you're back in the Killing Joke days. And I'm like, if you want Brian Boland, don't try to emulate him. Get Brian Boland. He's still around, They're so late anyway, he would have had time.
I've said this before. The comic book series I want to see is a mini series about the guy who has to, Joker's HR person, who has to hire his henchmen. I mean, how the Joker's killed his henchmen so often that I'm like, who's going to work for him? How do you convince a henchman to work for the Joker when he's killed his last 150 henchmen? I mean, imagine that guy's skill set. He's like, hey, listen to me. I know that the Joker sometimes gets a little angry and crazy and kills a henchman here and there, but we've got a really good resurrection program. We can get you into the Lazarus pit, I swear. And if you have to go into the Lazarus pit, we got some extra money for you. We rent it out. But I was like, how does the Joker ever have henchmen? He kills them all the time. That's why I couldn't make it through. What was it? The second Batman movie with of the trilogy. I watched the what's that director's name again?
Are you talking about the Christopher Nolan years? The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's the Joker.
I made it through the first movie and didn't like it at all. Then the second movie came on and the Joker is killing his henchmen. I'm like, I can't take this. And I just turned it off and didn't watch any more of it. But it's like, that's the miniseries I want to see. The guy who hires the Joker's henchmen. I think that's more interesting than the Joker.
Well, the Heath Ledger Joker is something I can watch all day, but it was his movie. It wasn't a Batman movie.
I couldn't make it through the Joker killing his henchman scene. I was just like, all right, I've had it. I've seen this too many times.
Yeah. But, the third one with Bane was horrible. I mean, I was like, what happened? There's somebody on here. Where did he go? Albert Bailey keeps asking about Sam Keith. Apparently he's mad at Sam Keith for not finishing Batman Max or something. This is funny.
Curious the Stage. I don't remember those.
Yeah. I mean, I go way back with Sam Keith, and I actually right behind me have some of his first ink work that I found on Manhunter in 1988 or something.
I'm not a fan of Sam Keith. I mean, I remember liking those Epicurus the Sages, but I never read any of his, superhero stuff. Really, just doesn't do much for me.
Max is fun, but he has Messner Lobes and stuff. I mean, Sam Keith. He reminds me of. Oh my God, I cannot be going blank. I've said Arthur Pseudonym. I think you go back and look at a strip called Mudwog by Arthur Pseudonym, and I think Sam Keith owes somebody some money. Sam Keith, I see a lot of Von Bode, Von Bode, and in his work. Bode, yeah.
And Charlie and Flytrap, I always mention from Epic Comics with Arthur Pseudonym.
Yeah.
Sudam, however he sells and say his name, I have no idea.
Yeah. John, we got people, there's some Joker fans on it. I'm going to have to wrap this up in a minute. I should have been on half an hour ago. But it goes, and Batman get dumb because he is so unpredictable that he can't figure out what the Joker will or could do next. So
just punch him. Just punch him. You can figure out how to defeat an army of Martians with a cigarette lighter. You can punch the Joker in the head. Come on. It's not that hard.
See, I like that premise, Jared. This is Gore Vidal. I like that premise, Jared. Sounds like a job for Ed Brubaker, the Elmore Leonard of comics.
There we go. And the reference was the Army of Martians reference was to when who was it? Howard Porter and God, the Invisibles guy, whose name just flew out of my head again, relaunched the JLA. Grant Morrison, Howard Porter, which were some good issues.
Yeah.
But it was once again super genius Batman who saved the day. That was like in how long ago were those issues? Late 90s? 98?
Yeah, we're in the ballpark. Yeah.
That was a long time ago. Holy crap. Well, that's when, Batman figured out how to defeat the army of Martians with a cigarette lighter or something. It was just like, oh, God.
You're white Martians. I know what you are. It was a super team from space, and he figured out they were white Martians. And I'm like, I didn't know there was white Martians. How did that escape me? And then they were also bringing in Jim of Saturn. Was that his name? And they were saying that there's an offshoot of red Martians. I'm like, what the hell are they doing over there? I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, but most people like the Joker a lot more than I do, which is why he shows up in the comics all the time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things it's really odd. I've met people who don't like Joker. Then I met people who don't like versions of the Joker because they say he's supposed to be funny. And what they've done with Heath Ledger isn't funny. They don't like when he gets cool, when he gets up to be a killer. They like I've met people who didn't like Joker. They didn't like certain versions of the Joker. And it just turns into a rabbit hole if you don't watch yourself. There's been a lot of interpretations.
I just want Batman to punch him in the face, and the issue's done.
When they came up with the idea that the Joker cuts his own face off, I'm just sort of like, that's not the Joker. Joker is anarchy and does things because he thinks it's funny. I even have an interpretation of the Joker.
Right.
Cutting your face off is not funny. You know what I mean? He's not sadistic. He's more methodical, and there's got to be a joke there. He's not something that walked out of Seven with Brad Pitt. You know what I mean? I don't know. People got their favorite Batman villain, which is the Scarecrow. Yeah, Batman's got that rogues gallery where everybody can come up with.
I'm not a fan of the Scarecrow, only because I really only know the Marvel Scarecrow is pretty lame. So every time the Batman Scarecrow would show off, I'd go, oh, not this lame guy again. But it wasn't the Batman Scarecrow I read anything of it. It was always the Marvel Scarecrow.
Challenge the Super Friends when I was a kid. They had the Scarecrow. I mean, when it comes to my Tyler came a DC guy, man, they got me when I was a kid and did that propaganda brainwashing. Captain Cold is supposed to be able to shoot the planet Earth and have icicles hanging off of it. Go watch the opening credit. He's supposed to be that powerful. All right. I do have to wind this up, but I think we got a couple of topics from when we do this again. And I do need to do it earlier in the morning as we get closer to summer and stuff. But man, this was fun. I hate to be the one to shut it down, but we've gone 2.5 hours.
It's got to end sometime or another.
It flew by. I'm gonna have to change the title of this too, so that's cool. So, but thanks for everybody popping in there. Go subscribe to Jared. Subscribe to me. Hit those bells. Get the drop menu with the bells and hit all, so you'll know when the show is and when his stuff's on. And we need to start asking people to leave comments for maybe a topic or two. Maybe we can bring up something.
Yeah, anything you wanted us to talk about, as if we can't just talk. We just picked a month and just talked and talked and talked.
Yeah,
I do anything you want us to talk about?
No, I do better when it's like no preparation. It's on the spot. I'm a spontaneous guy. That's how I like doing my trips. All right, guys. Thanks for popping in there. Let's see. People are giving us some props there, so I appreciate that. Okay. Be excellent to each other, and we'll catch you guys again later.
All right. Have a good one.